My name is Nick Donahue, and it is my absolute honor to be with you here this morning as Governor Spanberger's Secretary of Transportation. I just want to say at the outset, I really look forward to working with each and every one of you. I've had an opportunity to speak with a number of you one-on-one. For those of you I haven't had the chance to, I apologize. My schedule's been a little tough with the Assembly, but I will be reaching out to talk with all of you here in the coming weeks. And I really do sincerely look forward to working with you over the coming years. We're getting ready to start the workshop agenda, but before we get into there, I just wanted to say a few things and then also introduce a few of the new team members so that you know who you have here to support you all as we move forward with the decisions that this body has to consider. So I just want to talk about a few principles that are kind of paramount to my perspective on how I plan to approach this job and how I hope we can work together on it. And I think the first thing I want to really just talk about is transparency and accountability. That is paramount. From my perspective, I hope to have both those things with you, other elected officials, and the public. At the end of the day, all the decisions we make here are about spending taxpayer dollars, and so we need to explain the rationale for why the decisions we're making, hear public feedback, take that into account, and again, be very transparent about why we are moving in the directions that we're moving. Ultimately, we may not agree on everything, and that is fine, but I do want you to bring your perspectives. You are appointed to this body by a governor to represent communities. You are, public figures in your communities, and you represent them. You have folks that are going to tell you things that are really important for me and my team to understand as we consider these decisions, and I'm certain will improve our decision-making process. So I really do hope to have meaningful discussions with each member of this body, both in private but also at this setting here, so that we can move forward with decisions that we think best serve the public and drivers and other transit users here in the Commonwealth. On the accountability side, I want to echo, I think, what a past Secretary of Transportation said. Our fiduciary responsibility is to the taxpayers of Virginia. And that means we need to both make our decisions in a thoughtful manner, but also look back at our decisions and understand, how did they work? Did they deliver the results that we are hoping they would? And that's not to second guess decisions of the past. It's to inform our future decision making. And so if we made a decision for a certain reason and expected an outcome and that didn't happen, that doesn't mean what we did was wrong, but it does mean we need to think about how we're going to do things moving forward. And so again, that's going to be a part of some of our discussions as we move forward. I also really want to work on affordability. Transportation is the second biggest household expense for Virginians. That's going to mean different things in different places. So in some parts of the state, that may mean are there ways to provide faster and shorter trips. In other parts of the state, that may mean providing more travel choices to individuals, but this is a big thing that I want to focus on as Secretary, and it's something that I know we need to be looking at. And it also gets into really economic competitiveness of Virginia. The transportation network is the backbone of our economic development and our future growth. It connects people to jobs, it helps move goods to places, and the decisions and investments that we make here as a board really impact what that's going to be like in the future for the businesses and residents of the Commonwealth. And that's why I think it's really important, again, back to the transparent and accountable process that we have as we move forward in our decision making here. Two other things I want to hit on is safety is a big focus that I would like to have. This is my fourth governor that I've worked for. When I came back the second time, we had 3 fatalities in 2014 on the Commonwealth's highways. Again, any fatality is too many, but we've been well over 900 for a number of years. I understand the figures for 2025 may show a significant decline, but we're still going to be above that 2014 number, and I would like to see if we can't move below that number. And again, folks have been working really hard on safety, so it's not as if we haven't been doing a lot of work, but with the kind of persistency and where we are on those statistics, it says to me that we need to look at new options and explore other kind of creative ways of tackling these challenges. And some of those may work and some may not, and that's okay, but we have to keep trying things to drive that number down because we're not in the place where we should be. We should not be having 700, 800, 900 fatalities on Virginia's highways. And then the last point that I want to make, and for any of you who've worked with me in the past, you've probably heard this before, but I believe a universal truth of transportation is that we will always have more needs than available resources. We are never going to have enough money to fund every project that is of value or benefit to a particular community. That means we have to make tough choices. But it also means when we make these decisions, we need to think about how do we make the most cost-effective choices to use our dollars wisely and to get the most benefits for the most people in Virginia. A lot of times I've found when we engage with folks, they want the perfect solution. Perfect is often expensive. And from my kind of perspective, if we can realize 70 or 80% of the benefits for 20 or 30% of the cost, that is a win. It also means we can do that in 2 or 3 more places instead of just driving benefits to a single community. And so I apologize in advance if I keep bringing this up and you find it a bit trying in times, but I'm going to keep bringing this up because, again, we have limited resources and our job is to really drive benefits across the Commonwealth. And I think the only way we can do it in that type of scenario is by really focusing on how do we drive cost-effective investments. So I appreciate your indulgence there as I kind of just said a few words here at the beginning. And now I'd like to ask the members of the Secretary of Transportation's office to introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Laura.
Hello. Thanks, Ethan. My background is at the past 4 years. But I see it.
Got to pass McCarter. I've been told you should come to the podium. We have a number of folks watching online, and they could not hear Laura.
Folks, good morning. Carter Hutchinson. I am the other Deputy Secretary of Transportation. I worked previously in the Northam administration as the Deputy Policy Director for a number of years, where I worked very closely with then Deputy Secretary Donahue and Secretary Valentine on a lot of big achievements that the Northam administration was able to get across the finish line. Worked for some General Assembly members and good amount of experience around Capitol Square. So looking forward to working with all of you. And, Michael.
Thank you, Carter. Michael?
Morning, everyone. My name is Michael York, the Assistant Secretary of Transportation. I started my career as a Virginia Management Fellow some years ago, and then spent some time at the Department of Rail and Public Transportation before going on to the U.S. Department of Transportation, where I was at the U.S. DOT Volpe Center and at the Federal Railroad Administration. I'm originally from Hampton Roads, so having been in Richmond before and loving it here, going up to D.C. and Massachusetts, I'm really happy to be back in Virginia. Serving this administration. And it's very nice to meet you all. Excited to work together.
Thank you, Michael. Director Zimmerman?
Thank you. It's nice to meet everyone. I'm Maria Zimmerman. I'm the Director of Rail and Public Transportation for the Commonwealth. Moved here with my family in 1997 to actually work at the Federal Transit Administration. We moved from Minnesota. I mentioned to some of you, my family still lives in rural Minnesota, and so rural transportation issues are very important to me. But lived up in Northern Virginia for a number of years, worked at the federal government, spent some time on Capitol Hill, and also with a national nonprofit that was working on transportation issues, transit-oriented development, and a number of related things. In 2012, I started my own business, similar to Laura. So I had my own consulting business doing transportation planning and policy work, worked around the country, did that for 11 years, took a little brief hiatus to work at US DOT during the Biden administration, where I helped to lead a number of technical assistance efforts, and also was the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy, helping to implement the bipartisan infrastructure law. So have worked on rail and transportation issues for much of my career, moved to Richmond in 2015, and I'm excited to be working here in my hometown and with the Commonwealth. So I look forward to working with you all to really continue making our rail and transit systems, I think, some of the best in the nation.
Thank you, Director Zimmerman. And then we have a stranger to my right who none of you have met, Commissioner Bridge.
Morning, everyone. I'm very fortunate to have another opportunity to serve another governor, so I will keep my remarks brief, but it will be a very exciting opportunity to be able to continue to enhance transportation through the highways that we have in the next coming 4 years. And I think you'll see some announcements today, potentially, that will continue to help shape our program. So, exciting.
Thank you, Commissioner. And then just a few remarks. I see some folks I think are probably signed up to speak potentially during the action meeting. So we're getting ready to start our workshop meeting. When that concludes, we will move into the action meeting. If that runs until lunchtime, we will then complete the workshop and then move to the action meeting. So I just want to kind of set some expectations for folks who may be in the audience there so you kind of understand when you'll have your opportunity. We have 10 agenda items on the workshop agenda, and so when we get through those, that's when we'll be moving to the action. And with that, we are commencing the workshop meeting of the Commonwealth Transportation Board here in February. And Mr. Short, you're up first. 1 second, Mr. Short. I forgot to do the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everyone could rise.
The flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, Mr. Short, you may get started.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. This morning I've got a presentation for an economic development access application in Amelia County, the Richardson Road Industrial Site. Just to give you a little background again and orientation on this, although I might skim this down a little bit moving forward because it seems like I'm coming to you on the regular with these EDA applications, which is great. But just a quick overview as a reminder, the program provides allocations for projects with known industries and for those that are purely speculative. The EDA program is a state-funded program that's administered by VDOT's Local Assistance Division, and our applications are accepted on a rolling basis. A business must be designated as a basic employer by the Virginia Economic Development Partnership to qualify for the EDA program, which means that 51% or more of the facility's revenue must be generated outside of the Commonwealth. Our friends at VEDP determine if a business meets that basic employer requirement for us. The EDA program provides a higher amount of allocations for sites that are designated as a major employment and investment, which are sites that generate at least $250 million of capital investment and 400 full-time jobs. Traditional projects are defined as those with a known business and where sufficient capital investment is documented prior to the allocation of the EDA funds. And bonded projects are those where funds are allocated with a provision for an appropriate surety from the locality. In February of 2022, the board updated the EDA program to include new allocations that could support design-only grants that do not meet the MEI criteria. And it provides for funding of up to $200,000 for design for access improvements for new or potential sites. And this opportunity really provides localities, particularly smaller localities, the ability to address capital investment lead times, increases the site's readiness for potential businesses, and ultimately makes the site more attractive for development. So the site for today is, again, in Amelia County at the Richardson Road Industrial Site. This map gives you a little bit of orientation of where it is. It is the county acquired the property in 2023, and the site has 95 acres available for development with a potential build-out of 1 million square foot of a building footprint. It's located along Route 360, 13 miles from Route 460, and 26 miles from Interstate 288. So again, the non-MEI design-only project would provide funding for designing entrance improvements, right and left turn lanes into the site to accommodate future industrial traffic and the design of an initial access road into the site. Our friends at VDP have designated it as a Tier 2 site as part of their Business Ready Site program, which equates to, as you may recall, there are Tier 1 through Tier 5. 5 is ready to go. Tier 1 is raw land. So this would really help advance and position this site for additional development and preparation for development. It indicates that the site, as a Tier 2, it indicates that that site is under public ownership. It has a comprehensive plan that reflects that the site is intended for industrial or commercial use. Amelia County is requesting an allocation of $165,000, with $15,000 of that being matched dollar for dollar, with a total cost of $180,000. And here's just sort of a schematic. This is based off of the conceptual site plan that was submitted in our discussions with them that really lines out the parcel to support the land base that they've got identified for potential development, which is shown in red. The access road will design, again, the entrance improvements as well as a 0.45 mile long road into the site with 2 stub outs for future access points, which again aligns with the conceptual site plan that they've developed. So with that, our next steps would be, following today's presentation, would be to bring this back to the board at your March meeting for your consideration. And if approved, we would enter into a standard state aid agreement with the county. They would be looking to administer this. In recent record, this would be the county's first project that they've initiated, but it is a design-only project, and they have identified and secured a design consultant already, so they are ready to go. They've got the funds set aside and are ready to support this project. And of course, we'll certainly be there to help them along the way with it as well. So if there are any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Do any members of the board have any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Smizik?
Morning, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. I'm here today to provide an update on the environmental impact statement, or EIS, being prepared for the Nimmo Parkway Phase 7B project. The project is administered by the City of Virginia Beach. VDOT is conducting the EIS on behalf of the city and in cooperation with the Federal Highway Administration to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act. As illustrated on the slide, today is fourth in a series of presentations designed to provide this board with information to make a location decision per the state code referenced on the slide. Your location decision will represent the preferred alternative for the project and be documented as such in the EIS. The intent of today's presentation is to make a recommendation on that preferred alternative. VDOT would then return as early as your March meeting to seek formal action on that alternative. But before we get to the recommendation, provide some background so we're all operating on the same page. The graphic on the left shows our project area's general location within Southside Hampton Roads. The graphic on the right illustrates it more closely. The solid red line on the left or west side of the map illustrates the portions of Nimmo Parkway that have already been constructed. The orange line on the east is a portion 7A that is under construction right now. And the red dashed line is the proposed 7B segment that is the subject of this EIS. This figure illustrates our study area and shows the termini for the different alternatives. At this zoomed in view, you can see that Back Bay National Wildlife Refuge abuts both sides of the proposed corridor. And we also have the Oceana Dam Neck Annex located just northeast of the project area. Public involvement surrounding this project began back in 2018 when the city was proposing an environmental assessment to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act. That environmental assessment was released in 2022 with a public hearing. Comments on that public hearing elevated the level of document to the EIS we're working on now. We introduced the EIS to the public in the summer of 2024 with a virtual public meeting. And in May of 2025, Federal Highway Administration issued the notice of intent to prepare the EIS. That's the formal step in the process and provides opportunity for public comment. To inform the decision we'll be asking of this board, the city and VDOT initiated a public comment period in February 19th with a virtual public meeting scheduled for tomorrow night and an in-person public hearing scheduled for Thursday. We would come back to this board with a full summary of public comments before seeking an action. Agency involvement for the EIS began in April of 2024 with our partners at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. EPA, and the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, joining VDOT, Federal Highway Administration, and the city at monthly meetings to work through the different milestones in the process. Primary themes in those discussions included potential impacts to the National Wildlife Refuge and the surrounding wetlands and floodplains. The U.S. Navy stating that Dam Neck Annex shall not be considered as a permanent route for access to the Sand Bridge community. And most recently, the Nansemond Indian tribe sent a letter to Federal Highway Administration identifying the National Wildlife Refuge as a traditional cultural place, which deserves certain considerations under the National Historic Preservation Act. The purpose and need documents the goals of a project in the EIS and serves as the primary criteria in the alternative screening process. The alternatives that have advanced all provide reliable access and connectivity to the Sand Bridge community by considering flooding, roadway deficiencies, crashes, and other obstructions. This leaves us with 3 alternatives currently under consideration: the no-build alternative, the Nimmo Parkway alternative, which is the 1.8-mile segment the city has planned for, and then an improve existing Sand Bridge Road alternative, which is often required by the regulatory agencies involved in the process. Given the constraints surrounding Sand Bridge Road, to improve that roadway would require realigning and elevating the roadway approximately 3.4 miles to create a roadway comparable to what's proposed for Nimmo Parkway. This graphic just depicts the 2 alternatives, the dashed line being the Nimmo Parkway alternative, and that solid red-orange line serving as the improve existing. Based on this information and an endorsement from the City of Virginia Beach, VDOT presents the Nimmo Parkway alternative as the recommended preferred alternative. It follows the city's existing right-of-way and plans for the roadway, has fewer impacts to wetlands and streams, and comes at a lower cost than the other alternative. All that information is summarized on this slide, showing that the Nimmo Parkway alternative is the least impactful and least costly. Those costs are preliminary planning level costs in 2025 dollars. Following the identification of a preferred alternative, we would expect the city to advance with more detailed cost estimates to refine that preferred alternative estimate.
Mr. Smizik?
Yes, sir.
Just really quick, Commissioner, I know the board adopted a policy when it comes to location decisions about the length of validity in terms of when a project either advances or does not advance. Could you just kind of walk us through that? And then I have a follow-up question for you, Mr. Smizik.
Sure. Just as a reminder, the board's action is to be able to reevaluate the location decisions that are made by this board every 3 years if that project has not advanced to either right-of-way or construction in a timely manner. It's to be able to make sure that we don't encumber those properties for long periods of time should individuals want to sell those properties. So the board has 2 options, or 3 options actually, that they can take. They can affirm the previous board's decision on maintaining the location decision. They could then turn around and vacate that decision. In some cases that we have had a lengthy time period from the location decision and is encumbered, and it would take a whole brand-new EIS or an EA to be able to make that decision. So we would vacate it and do another study at that point, or defer that until there's further decisions to be made or brought back to the board to be able to make a final decision in either vacating that right-of-way or vacating that decision or reaffirming it.
Commissioner, does that clock start with the board's selection of the preferred alternative or with the NEPA approval from FHWA?
I would have to take another look at what the actual policy is, but I would assume that it's once the NEPA evaluation has been approved in final form and the EIS has been accepted, And at that point, the clock would start ticking because we can't build a project or start encumbering additional funds until that NEPA decision has been made.
And so, Mr. Smizik, my follow-up question is, I see the preferred alternative, or recommended preferred alternative, excuse me, has a price tag of $128 million. Does the city have identified funds available to advance this, or just have some amount of funding available?
Sir, as of today, the city has 90% of the funds necessary to advance the project.
Thank you, because I think that's helpful as the board kind of considers whether to, how to vote on this decision. Thank you.
The last thing I would highlight on this slide is the Parks and Recreation line. That work is still under coordination with the Department of Historic Resources, Federal Highway, and the Nansemond Tribe, and the Fish and Wildlife Service. Those decisions will certainly impact the footprint and layout of the alternative, but we would not anticipate them to impact the location decision that we'd be requesting from you all. So moving forward, as I mentioned before, we have a location public hearing scheduled for later this week. We would then come back to CTB as early as your March meeting to seek an action on the preferred alternative and spend the rest of the summer completing that coordination I just mentioned. If we hit those marks, we could anticipate a draft EIS being issued this summer and a Federal Highway NEPA decision in the spring of 2027. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time. Welcome any additional questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Smizik. Do any members of the board have questions? Thank you very much. Ms. Pryor, it's your turn.
Morning, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. Today, I'll be speaking to you about the preliminary FY27 to 2032 Commonwealth Transportation Fund 6-year financial plan. The updated December revenue forecast, inclusive of FY27 through FY32, shows increases across major revenue sources in total over our previous expectations. The retail sales and use tax has a reduction of $556 million. The motor vehicle sales and use tax has an increase of $457 million. Statewide motor fuels tax also shows an increase of $476 million. Highway use fee shows a small reduction of $24 million, and the insurance premium tax has an increase of $105 million. We also include federal revenues. We've had minor modifications based on updated obligation authority adjustments from the Federal Highway Administration. This chart shows the value of the revenue changes to the CTF since last December 2024. You can see the net increase across the various categories of revenues for a total 6-year window increase of $521 million. This chart just shows the actual value of the various revenue sources across all 6 years. The 6-year financial plan identifies the planned funding for allocation to the various modes. The preliminary 6-year financial plan allocates $59.6 billion from all revenue sources. That includes $1.5 billion of debt for Route 58, I-81 financing, Garvey bonds, and special structures. There are transfers of $6.6 billion to the 3 regional authorities for transportation improvements, as well as $1.1 billion dedicated revenue for WMATA capital. This also includes $607 million of dedicated fuel tax for the I-81 corridor, $18.6 billion for the maintenance and operations program, and finally $17.2 billion for construction. That also includes about $2.6 billion of local and regional funding for construction projects. This chart shows the 6-year financial plan estimated revenues across the various categories. Again, you can see the grand total at the bottom of $59.6 million available to be allocated across all the various categories. Towards the bottom of the slide, you can also see the transfer I just mentioned to the regional authorities and WMATA, as well as slightly in the middle of the page, the various debt categories I mentioned.
Ms. Pryor, please don't leave the slide yet. So for members of the board, there's a few things on here I just want to hit on as things what we may see changes to in the future and are things outside of our control, but which may impact us. So the current federal transportation reauthorization expires soon. There are ongoing debates on Capitol Hill about that. The previous authorization, known as the, IIJA, I always get the I's mixed up, but it was the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, something along those lines. That was a kind of, I'll call it a unicorn in terms of federal transportation bills, and so it had basically the funds that come by formula from the Highway Trust Fund. Those are the traditional kind of dollars that we receive through the federal transportation bill. It also had something that at least I hadn't seen in my 20 years working on transportation, which was a multi-year advance appropriations from the general fund. There was a lot of dollars that came to Virginia through that second category. We are not assuming that second category continues kind of moving forward there because it's not coming from the Highway Trust Fund, and so there's different kind of commitments the federal government makes for those dollars. We are assuming that the base programs from the Highway Trust Fund continue. This is historically what we've done when a reauthorization bill has been pending, and so this happens every typically 4 to 6 years, sometimes as little as 2 in the case of the 2012 bill. There are ongoing discussions on Capitol Hill, and there could be a chance where we could come back and say that this number is actually going up some, so that Kim doesn't get terribly upset, Ms. Pryor, doesn't get terribly upset with me. We could also come back and say, hey, this number is going down some, potentially moving forward. We think we've made a risk-adjusted, a decision here that is supported based on past kind of outcomes that we've seen, but I wanted to flag for you all that sometime in the next year or two, we're going to come back and we're going to say we were right, or here's how much we were wrong, and we were wrong in a good way or a bad way. And we're going to see some changes there. Another item that I wanted to flag is there are ongoing discussions right now with the Virginia General Assembly, particularly about transit funding in general, but particularly about WMATA funding. For those of you in the Northern Virginia area, you may have heard some of the discussions over the past 18 months about WMATA's kind of capital funding situation. To make a very long story as short as I can, WMATA was, started in the 1970s. It never had dedicated funding to help it support the reconstruction of that system. There may have also been some decisions by boards in the 90s that if we could look back and do things different, we might do a few things differently. But in 2018, the state, working with DC and Maryland, provided the first dedicated funding to WMATA with the express intent of please go rebuild your system. Political decisions at that time made it so that the funding we provided was flat. I believe the commissioners talked to you a lot about the impact of inflation over the past several years, and so where we're going to find ourselves in about 2 years with WMATA is all of that dedicated funding, because it's flat, is going to be going to debt service, and they can no longer issue capital bonds to support the kind of ongoing repair and maintenance of that system, and that will shrink their capital budget by about 40%. To state the obvious out loud, that will have a significant impact on the condition of that system kind of long-term. And I think they've done a pretty good job since 2018 of reinvesting in the system. They've cut their state of good repair backlog in half. Again, they still do have a backlog. I don't think it's terribly economical to get your backlog to zero there, but without additional funding, in about 7 or 8 years, we'll be in a place that's worse than where we were before the 2018 funding. And so that's kind of an ongoing discussion with the General Assembly. I bring that up for 2 reasons. Depending on how the General Assembly acts, we may need to have ongoing discussions here at this body, either with accountability provisions that might be a part of that funding, or discussions about how to help address WMATA's needs if the General Assembly chooses not to act kind of moving forward there. The other thing is, as they talk about how to address the situation, there may be other revenue impacts on this chart that could either increase or decrease available funding to different parts of the transportation system. And so I just wanted to flag that there's an ongoing discussion with the Assembly right now on that topic. Mr. Minshew, I see you brought your microphone down.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I don't know if this board has ever received a briefing on the Senate Joint Resolution 28 work that was done by Senator Eben's committee, or the DMV Moves project that I believe the Secretary worked on. But given that we think that this General Assembly session will present either budget or standalone legislation dealing with WMATA, at the appropriate time, Mr. Secretary, it may be good for us to have a briefing on what has happened in the past and what it's going to be in legislation or budget that might be coming up post-crossover.
Mr. Minshew, that seems eminently reasonable, so I think that's certainly something we can add to a future agenda. Ms. Sellers?
For the federal appropriations, do they typically do that on an annual basis? Or is it more like Department of Ed that does it on a 5 to 10-year basis?
So, not 10 years, unfortunately. The federal reauthorization bill typically is a 4 to 6 year kind of commitment of funding. When funds come out of the Highway Trust Fund, and the term trust fund there is very important, it comes with what's called contract authority, which is a commitment from the federal government to reimburse us moving forward. And so we feel very confident in counting on those funds into the future because the trust fund has certain protections in terms of how the Budget Control Act of 1968 works that allows us to to assume those with a greater degree of confidence than one could with, say, a general fund appropriation, which is subject to that annual process.
And so with the money that was put in place under the IIJA, is there an opportunity for states to maybe compete for what's not spent yet before it goes back, or?
The answer is maybe, but I think it's unlikely. So the additional funding from the IIJA that was in advanced appropriations, a lot of that was sent to the states by formula. And so we'll be talking in future meetings about pavement and bridge and other infrastructure conditions. You're going to see over the last 4 years our bridge conditions really rise. One of the major programs that the IIJA provided additional funding for from the general fund was bridge. And so we got an extra, I think it was 120 million, give or take, a year for bridge funding, and the commissioner and his team have put that to good use, and we can see kind of the results there. They also had a number of discretionary grant programs. Most of those funds have been awarded at this time. Again, if we do see opportunities, I assure you we will do our best to take full advantage of those moving forward. I think it's likely, though, that what we see is unspent money potentially being clawed back rather than it being redistributed or opened up for other states to go after. And so they actually just clawed back about $500 million in electric vehicle charging station funds in the last Appropriations Act for transportation.
Mr. Secretary,
Smoot.
what is driving the reduction in sales and use tax funds in the budget? And is that indicative of a broader problem for the Commonwealth?
So, Mr. Smoot, I'm going to start, and then I'm going to look at Ms. Pryor, who may not be able to give you a fulsome answer. So just as a reminder, in the past, and by in the past, I mean a long time ago, before I worked in transportation, the Secretary and its agencies actually developed our own revenue estimates. At some point in that process, people thought it might be best for somebody else to do the revenue estimates rather than the Department of Motor Vehicles. And so the Department of Tax, fully separated from our secretary, does all of the revenue estimates for the Commonwealth. And so they have developed these kind of moving forward. I did think it was interesting that we saw the decreases go up over time there on the sales tax. I think what my bigger takeaway, though, is I'm very happy to see that some of the changes we made in the 2020 omnibus bill have, I think, achieved their outcome, which is that we have three kind of sturdy main stools in our funding sources with the retail sales tax, the motor vehicle sales tax, and the motor fuels tax. And so I see one going up and another going down. And because we have this diversification that certain other states don't have, it, I think, helps us stay a bit more steady overall than what they kind of experience, which I know I didn't answer your question at all there. I was trying to give you some additional perspective. And so I'll now let Ms. Pryor see if she has any insight.
I don't have a whole lot to add, Secretary Donahue, but the Governor's Advisory Council on Revenue Estimates adopted a more cautious economic forecast, and it's the basis of the revenues estimates that we're using today. So what I would point out is that while it appears to be a decrease over prior assumptions, there is still growth each year.
Thank you.
Moving on from revenues, those revenues we just talked about are allocated across various categories. You can see the debt service at the top of $2.8 billion, maintenance and operations, as I mentioned previously, 18.6, followed by the distribution to the various modes, leaving $7.2 billion available for construction. And at the bottom of the slide, you can also see, again, the transfers to the regional authorities. In terms of VDOT-specific updates, our assumptions are to continue the planned support for the operational needs of the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel expansion, with additional funding provided for VDOT operations. You'll recall that the master tolling agreement requires the department to take on all roadside and tunnel operations costs. We're also continuing the approved infusion beginning in FY '26 through the 6-year window to 2032 to support paving contracts and increase costs for maintenance activities, including ongoing base adjustments beginning in FY '27 and beyond for financial assistance to localities. And at the bottom, you'll see that the Highway Maintenance and Operations Fund, based on all these assumptions, has an expected deficit of $633.7 million. We will address that using $287.2 million of federal funds and the crossover of $346.5 million of state funds from the construction fund.
Ms. Sellers?
The construction number, is that before or after crossover?
Ms. Sellers, if I could rephrase your question, are you asking, are the numbers presented on the previous slide showing what is available for construction after crossover?
Yes.
Okay. And so, folks, just as a reminder, Virginia has kind of a unique provision in our Appropriations Act. A lot of states, they appropriate a very specific dollar for maintenance and then a very specific dollar for construction. Since 2004, we've had a provision in the Appropriations Act that says, without regard to what the code says is available for maintenance, if the commissioner determines that additional funds are necessary, funds will come off the top of the construction program in an amount necessary to support the maintenance needs of the state. I'd say it's essentially our fix-it-first policy, making sure we don't build a backlog of deferred maintenance in our state highway system. And so that is kind of how this works. And so while we have a deficit, there's never actually a deficit in spending. It's just a deficit in terms of the need relative to what is in the Highway Maintenance and Operating Fund prior to, the commissioner exercising the authority that exists in the Appropriations Act. But to your point, the number you saw on the previous slide, you don't have to subtract an additional $346 million from it.
What's driving the deficit? What's the budget driver in the Highway Maintenance and Operation Fund?
Ms. Sellers, if I can start. So we've had crossover since that provision was put in law in 2004. And so I think this is my 14th year or 13th year working in the Secretary's office. There has not been a year without crossover. I think the question has always been, which way is it trending? I think we've actually trended slightly downward, if I recall correctly, year over year, Commissioner, or stayed flat.
1 year we did.
But the trend is generically not in the right direction, Ms. Sellers. We went down a little bit after the 2020 omnibus bill. But with the impacts to inflation that we've seen since the COVID kind of times, it has crept back up. And so this is why we are here today. I mean, at a very root level, it's the formula that exists in the Code of Virginia, which says it dumps all of the money into the Commonwealth Transportation Fund, and then it says 51% goes to the Highway Maintenance and Operating Fund, and 49% goes to the Transportation Trust Fund. And so if that number was different, then we wouldn't see crossover, but the net effect would be there'd still be less money in construction because we're just chopping up the same dollar differently.
So it's inflation that's creating a year-over deficit?
I would say it's both the formula in the code and the growth in inflation that has caused this number to go up over time.
I've spoken with a couple of folks on it. My concern with seeing this, especially the crossover on the construction side, is those of us in districts without an authority rely on the construction fund to fund new projects. And so every dollar that comes out of the construction funds impacts some districts differently and probably more than other districts. So when I see something like that, the question that I have is, what are we going to do about it? Do we just accept it like it is, or is there a time when the CTB starts asking the General Assembly or starts advocating for more money and to do this differently? And again, I understand what the code allows, and I understand the formula funding, but it is impacting the non-authority districts, the ones that don't have that special taxing authority, differently than the other districts. And so I'm putting it out to my colleagues too to be thinking about that because it impacts us. Thanks.
No, thank you, Ms. Sellers. I think I would make kind of one observation and then one kind of point. So I expect sometime this calendar year that we will be having a detailed discussion about these condition of basically pavements and bridges as well as other assets that VDOT maintains. The commissioner, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for this, 6 to 7 years ago in 2019, I'm not very good at math, so that's why I say 6 to 7, one of you probably knows exactly how many that is, did a detailed review of pavement and bridge conditions and came up with a life cycle kind of analysis of where we wanted to be in the future and developed an investment strategy to help us move in that direction. That's something that in my mind should be updated with some kind of cadence as we see how we're kind of moving forward with that. And I think when we do those types of updates, we should be asking the questions of what is the right target? What are the costs of that target? Are there different targets that we want to set that could have implications for the necessary resources there? And then also taking a look at things that weren't anticipated when we developed the strategy, just like I mentioned earlier, the bridge formula funds from the IIJA. And so I say all this to say we'll have an opportunity to talk about what is driving a lot of this in the coming months as the commissioner brings some of those discussions back to this body, and you'll get a kind of a look under the hood, if you will, of like why do we need this level of resources to maintain and address the state of good repair of the system. The other thing I would say, and this doesn't offset the regional authorities, but in the districts without regional authorities, you do have additional smart scale dollars that are not available to, say, a Northern Virginia or a Hampton Roads through the supplemental regional fuels tax, which is included as a part of your district grant program dollars in smart scale. That also has a significant impact on the 81 corridor, I should have flagged, particularly for the Stanton district. But so that doesn't offset it, but there is some funding there that mitigates that to an extent. But I think your point is a fair one about the impacts there, and it is dollar for dollar, and it's very real, the effect. Other comments before we move on?
Continuing on with VDOT program updates, I'll ask your indulgence and patience with me as I walk through this. The Code of Virginia specifies the amount of funding to provide to the revenue sharing program as the greater of either $100 million or 7% of the funds available for distribution. Based on our current revenue estimates and current budget assumptions, the 7% of the funds that are available exceed $100 million at this point. And so the table at the bottom of the slide shows the allocations to the revenue sharing program in each of the 6 years within the window. I would point out that revenue sharing applications have been taken in or being reviewed, and selections will be made this year for addition to the program in FY '29 and '30. At this point, we do not plan to allocate the amount of funding above $100 million, again, because it is based on budget assumptions, revenue assumptions at this time, 3 and 4 years out. So at some point, if that number gets to be a significant amount, we will have discussions with the board about how to address that.
And Ms. Pryor, though, our intent is also that if we do realize this amount above 100 for FY '27, we will make that available to accelerate projects that have previously been selected, which then can create potentially additional funding in the out years. But with the volatility in the revenue estimates and us just being a few $1 million over, we thought it was appropriate to take a conservative approach here and not promise people dollars we may or may not have with kind of minor changes to our overall revenue estimates.
Again, we have allocated and provided Garvey bonds, $100 million each in 3 fiscal years, FY '27, '29, and '31. We have set aside the estimated debt service from future federal funds. In terms of additional assumptions, we have also set aside the maximum amount allowed by the code of $25 million annually for the ITTF fund from the High Priority Projects Program, and $25 million annually from the Highway Construction District Grant Fund for unpaved roads. So after all those adjustments and takedowns and from the funding available for construction, these are the amounts available for each of the 5 formula programs. State of Good Repair, High Priority, Construction District Grant, Interstate, and Safety. Overall, you can see there's an uplift across the 6 years of about $231 million. Now I'll step through the individual programs for you. There's an increase to the State of Good Repair program of about $77 million. You can see that breakout between VDOT paving, VDOT bridge, locality pavement, and locality bridge.
Hey, my desk, could you actually go back to the previous slide just really quick? Not State of Good Repair, but the overall construction programs. So folks, I want to stress the first word on this slide, preliminary. As several of us were laughing about, some of you more than others, more than me mostly, it snowed a lot the last few weeks. And so these are the numbers that are preliminary. As we total up the kind of impacts overall on a number of things, particularly the snow budget, we may exceed what was set aside this year. We set aside, I believe it was $220 million. There's a pretty decent likelihood that we have spent more than that. Based on the kind of whole crossover thing we just talked about, that means depending on the amount we're over, we'll have two choices. We can defer certain aspects on the maintenance side, or we can increase crossover. And so depending, again, on what that quantum is, we'll need to come back to this body and talk about that. But some of these numbers may change as we move forward there, so I just wanted to kind of flag that for you. And then one of the other things is, in my discussion with a number of members in advance of this meeting, folks have kind of said, I'd like to understand how some of these programs work better. I don't have a good understanding of kind of some of the nuances there. So over the coming months, kind of linked to when we'll be working on action with these, I hope to bring back discussions to kind of walk through why was this program created, how does it function, and what have kind of been some of the discussions that have happened in the past around that, to try and make sure we all are, as we move forward and make decisions about allocations in a given program, we all have a level of understanding that makes us comfortable with kind of the questions before this body. Thank you, Kim.
Moving on through the formula programs, the Interstate Operations and Enhancement Program, again, receives 20% of the funds available for distribution. The very first line on top, you can see the I-81 Regional Fuels Tax contribution to that program for a total of $482 million. Below that, you can see the IOEP distribution to the various interstates, I-81, 95, 64, and other, as well as the set aside for NVTA. The bottom shows the differences from the previous assumptions. Again, the regional fuels tax is up $31.3 million, and the IOEP, which covers the other categories, is up $462 million. I will point out, if you notice on the very top line for I-81 regional fuels tax, the 2032 number is a good bit lower than the other numbers. There's no expected revenue decrease or impact to the funding stream. However, recall that we do have TIFIA loans, both existing and planned in the future, to support I-81, and that reduction reflects a planned debt service reserve fund draw to support an FY27 TIFIA loan. It's all planned. It may slide by a year or be adjusted, but just in case that stands out to you, I wanted to explain. The Virginia Highway Safety Improvement Program gets 10% of the funds available for distribution. Small nuance is that the Federal Highway Administration allows us to take a small portion off the top to cover program administration, development of the Highway Safety Fund, research and development, some pre-scoping of systemic treatments and that sort of thing. Once that is taken off the top, the code requires that we set aside 29% of what's left for behavioral strategies. Those funds are managed through DMV. The remainder of the funding is for other eligible projects managed by the department, and you can see there's $593.5 million available. That's an increase over the 6 years of $23.1 million.
And folks, I want to flag, I think this is one of the first program areas that we'll be talking about. And so this year, we are required to update what is called the Strategic Highway Safety Improvement Plan. That is a federal requirement, but it's also something that's been incorporated into kind of state code there. And so I expect we'll be having a number of discussions about both the capital investments that VDOT will be looking at in terms of a policy, but also the behavioral strategies from DMV. I'm not sure if DMV's been here in the past to present some of their ideas, but under the code, they're supposed to come, and I'll be making sure they do come and talk to this body about some of the things that they're thinking about. And once we've adopted the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, the next thing will be putting in place the investment strategy for these funds, which is a requirement of state code, and will outline kind of how and where we intend to use these funds, and then also the tracking mechanisms we want to put in place to understand whether or not they're delivering the results we hope to see. So I just wanted to flag, this is one of the earlier programs we'll be talking about, but it will be an ongoing discussion for some time.
Continuing on with construction programs, the High Priority Projects Program. Again, this is one of the two funding sources for the Smart Scale statewide prioritization process. You can see that that is up $46.2 million over the 6-year window from prior assumptions. Similarly, the Construction District Grant Program, there's a formula distribution similar to the High Priority Projects Program. And then there's the supplemental district grant funding that comes from the regional fuels tax revenue, leaving a total of about $2.6 billion across the 6-year window. Again, that's up $77.7 million from previous assumptions. In terms of next steps, we'll continue to monitor what's happening in the General Assembly for actions that might impact these assumptions. We'll also carefully watching what's happening at the federal level to things that might impact our budget assumptions. We'll come back to you with selections for revenue sharing and transportation alternatives. I believe there's some discussion of that later today. We'll bring draft budgets and the draft 6-year improvement program to you in April for your review, and then we will be scheduling spring public meetings across the state to go out and get feedback on the draft program. And finally, a final 6-year program and budget will be presented to you for approval in June.
Thank you,
That's
Ms.
my
Pryor. Are there
presentation.
any questions from members of the board? Mr. Coleman?
Thank you, Secretary. I've brought this thought to the board before, but with the continued adding of highway miles that I'm sure the commissioner could share with us each year, to piggyback on what Ms. Sellers said a few minutes ago, it's concerning to me that the demands of maintenance is going to continue to rise, and it's kind of like we've adopted a policy of rob Peter to pay Paul. And isn't it incumbent upon us, in fact, isn't it our fiduciary responsibility to bring it to the attention of the General Assembly to let them know, hey, we got a cliff coming, you guys need to start thinking about this, and we need to recalculate what we're doing here.
Mr. Coleman, I certainly think it is our responsibility to have the discussions in public to make sure all of our stakeholders, including the Assembly, are aware of kind of the challenges and opportunities that we face. And we have a mix of both, right? As we move forward, I'm a little reluctant for this body to directly advocate before the General Assembly. I'll just kind of say that out loud. I think at the end of the day, this body is governed by the Assembly, and so us kind of doing direct advocacy is a position I think we ought to seek to avoid. That being said, it is also our duty to make sure that everyone, elected officials, the public, and whether they're state or local elected officials, are aware of the challenges and circumstances that we face. I'm not sure it has always been clear to them, the trajectory and other things that we've had. And so I think that's part of why I hope in the coming months to have discussions about what are the puts and takes on the maintenance and state of good repair side, and what are some of those, challenges. Because I think the very first question, if you were to talk to anybody on the Money Committee staff and the General Assemblies, they'd say, okay, what happens if you reduce maintenance spending? Does it, do things fall apart, or are you still okay? And I think we owe it to folks to kind of show that decision-making and what we're thinking about as they, consider whatever options they may consider moving forward. And so I think this is the venue for us to provide that information and put it out there for the public to consider, and then ultimately the Assembly will do what it will do on those matters. Mr. Stant?
It appears to be we're in a kind of a vicious circle here. And I think a part of the problem are the localities as much as the General Assembly. Everybody's screaming about affordable housing, and the only way you're going to get affordable housing is to build another subdivision, put more people in that subdivision. That subdivision requires now traffic lights, additional lanes of traffic, and everything else. So it's not only incumbent on the General Assembly to recognize the problem, it seems to me that the localities share a great responsibility here. Try to understand every time they do something to support growth or affordability or new housing, it adds to the transportation. That's why, in my opinion, the maintenance fund is going to overtake the construction fund, and then we're going to have a real mess. So I don't know what the solution is, but I certainly see a problem.
I appreciate the observation, Mr. Stanton. I think, at the end of the day, this is also why we need to ensure we're being as creative as we can be and using all the tools at our disposal. I think an opportunity or tool that we haven't used as much recently that I hope we explore again in the coming years is looking at, public-private partnerships and how we can use those to address some of our major corridors, which should hopefully relieve some pressures on the construction program. I'm under no delusion that it's going to make this problem go away, right? So I don't mean to give that impression as we move forward there. Ultimately, congestion versus, free flow is something a lot of places have challenged. I've studied a lot of cities, and the only city I've seen really drive down congestion, and I don't say this to be flippant, but if you look at the Texas Transportation Institute's Urban Mobility Report, the city that's been most successful in the last 30 years is Detroit. And I think, we can say that's probably not because of the infrastructure investments that took place there. And if anyone's from Detroit, I'm not saying this to, that is not, there's no value judgment in my statement. It's just, if you look at the reports over 25 years, the city that saw the greatest decline was Detroit. And so I think we want to have more affordable housing. We want to have more housing. We want to have more growth in the Commonwealth. And I think what we have to do is try and use the resources we have available to provide the best system we can within those resources and to explain people what we can and cannot do. And then ultimately, elected officials and the public can determine whether or not they want us to do more or less, right? That is their decision. In the past, they've made the decision they didn't want us to do more, and at other times, they've made the decision they did want us to do more. I think what we need to do as a body is show that we are using these dollars wisely and we're putting them to good use, and that we should leave no question in that we're trying as best we can to deliver those results. And then ultimately, they will make different decisions in those bodies about whether or not more or less resources should come to this body. Mr. Griffin.
Mr. Secretary, thank you. I just had a quick question. So thank you, Ms. Pryor, for the presentation. It appears we have about $500 million more in revenue coming in than we anticipated, which is great. But what do we do in a downside case? Have we ever thought about having reserves? Or, it's important to agree with the Secretary's point that need always exceeds the capacity to fund it, but stability in funding is also really important in terms of maintaining a cost-effective program. And so have we thought about what we do on a downside if, God forbid, the economy dips and revenues really slow up, and now we're $1 billion shorter than we thought we would be?
Mr. Griffin, that's a very fair question. I think we can come back next month with a more fulsome kind of description of that. What I would say is, with the exception of the Great Recession in 2008, I'm knocking on wood as loudly as I can there, have not experienced any declines that would create that require wholesale modifications to thoughts in the 6-year program. We have experienced declines, of several $100 million over billions of dollars there, and we've traditionally been able to absorb that by basically pushing projects out or making kind of opportunity cost decisions on the maintenance and state of good repair side. But I think we can come back and talk about that with the board at a future meeting. But again, luckily, in my experience, it's only happened once in 2008, and I sincerely hope it does not happen anytime soon. Thank you.
Secretary.
Mr. Smoot.
I have drawn a conclusion from looking at these numbers, which I hope Ms. Pryor will be able to correct me from, and that is that we should anticipate less smart-scale funding in the next round than we have had in the current round. We looked at the high priority, we looked at the district grants, and I inferred from that the available money is going down in the next round.
Just Mr. Pryor, go ahead. I think it's actually not necessarily the case for the next round.
That's correct. But I would also say don't get too comfortable with these numbers. They're built on current assumptions and current revenue estimates. So when I come back to you in the spring, I'll have a lot more confidence in what the outlook might be for round 7.
When will it be known what is available for the next round of smart scale?
June.
Soon?
June.
June.
And Mr. Smoot, just to unpack that a little bit, what Ms. Pryor is getting at is there's several things she has to do and her team have to do to account for the kind of the full budget. So in June, you'll be adopting the budget. What we will know in June that we don't know today is the impacts on the maintenance side, particularly from snow, and the outcomes of the Assembly's actions, if any, as it pertains to revenues that might be available for transportation. And then secondarily, we sometimes get additional updates from tax on the revenue estimates. And so by June, we will have a greater sense of what those figures will be, and that's when we will adopt the budget, which will drive what we are telling applicants is available for Smart Scale as they apply, this fall, and we consider projects early next year. I would say, I think the last round of Smart Scale was like just under $1 billion, Kim, if I recall correctly. I'm cautiously optimistic, at the expense of Ms. Pryor giving me a dirty look, that we will be above that number for this next round, even if there's some impacts from the snow budget overall. But again, as to her point, we will be able to express with a higher degree of confidence what that specific number will be in June when you adopt the budget for the Commonwealth Transportation Fund.
Thank you.
I have one more question.
Sellers?
This behavioral strategies, you started the meeting saying the deaths on our highways are going up. And appears so is the amount of money we're paying for these behavioral strategies. So are we going to take a look at that and see, because we shouldn't be seeing that. If we're investing more in those strategies, we would want to see the deaths go down. So something's not working. And are we going to have a chance to look at whatever DMV is doing to spend $30 million?
So, Ms. Sellers, you absolutely are going to have that opportunity. And so part of the Strategic Highway Safety Improvement Plan will involve both VDOT and DMV coming before this body to talk about kind of the focus areas that they believe we need to look at, but also potential strategies. And then the follow-on to that will be an investment strategy policy that this body will adopt that will guide those investments. And then those investments on an individual basis will also be coming back to this body for approval. The Virginia Highway Safety Improvement Program was created in 2020, and then because of COVID and the impacts to revenues at that time, we didn't get all of that fully set up and running in the way in which I would have hoped. But we will be moving forward, and we'll be bringing both DMV and VDOT here to talk about those potential investments. Any other questions before Ms. Pryor moves on to her next presentation? Ms. Pryor.
While that's being queued up, my next presentation is a smart scale cancellation of the Centerville Turnpike Widening Phase 3 project in the Hampton Roads District. You'll recall, based on your smart scale policy, only the Commonwealth Transportation Board can cancel a project that was selected through the smart scale program. The Centerville Turnpike Widening Project was submitted by the City of Virginia Beach in Round 1 of Smart Scale. The original cost was $30 million, and the Smart Scale request was $6 million. The request was funded with district grant funds. The original scope included a 4-lane widening with a raised median, 4-foot on-street bike lane, sidewalks, curb and gutter, and storm water management and drainage, as well as the purchase of 1 bus and 2 new bus shelters. The benefits were primarily due to land use, congestion, and safety. This gives just a snapshot of the project again, $30 million project at submission, $6 million smart scale request. It scored 3.55 and ranked 8 out of 21 in the cohort. $535,000 has been expended to date. So since this project was selected, there were some pretty significant cost increases due to right-of-way acquisition and utility conflicts, which exacerbated inflation. Those delays then led to a required NEPA evaluation and other procedural delays due to federal requirements. At this point, the city is prioritizing projects with the greatest overall benefit in the city and feels that this project no longer provides the operational or transportation benefit relative to the cost and other higher priority needs within the city. In January, they requested cancellation of the project. I'll be coming to you next month with a proposed action to cancel the project, to seek reimbursement of all expended funds from the city, and transfer all unexpended construction district grant program funds back to the Hampton Roads deallocation balance entry. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Ms. Pryor? Mr. Coleman?
It's my understanding that $500,000+ is going to be clawed back. It's going to be repaid. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I know smart scale's near and dear to you, Mr. Secretary, but having a round one sitting in languish with $6 million sitting on the sidelines that staff has to manage and keep track of, I hope this body can take a look at that to see if there's any improvements or adjustments we can make to prevent that from happening.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. That's a fair point. Any other questions for Ms. Pryor? Oh, well, actually, Ms. Pryor, you're apparently not going anywhere. You're just listed second on this next agenda item. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Stadler, the Executive Director of the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority, up along with Ms. Pryor for our next item.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. It's good to see you this morning. I'm going to give Ms. Pryor just a slight break, but I'm here today to talk to you all about a pending agreement that we're looking for you all to approve in a future meeting between VPRA and VDOT to cover financing, debt financing for our Long Bridge project. Just some background on this. Thank goodness. I'm going to give you some background. This whole scenario started back in 2015 or so. As you can see, there was a memorandum of agreement that came from the inside the Beltway 66 tolling. This slide outlines those responsibilities. As you can see very clearly, there are no responsibilities here for VPRA because this was actually before we were created. But what this MOA did was this laid out the different responsibilities for each of the entities involved in that inside the Beltway tolling. As I think you recall, VDOT manages the toll revenues, operations, and maintenance of everything inside the Beltway. And then you see CTB, NBTC, DRPT have different responsibilities on where the excess money goes. Moving forward, after this MOA was signed, there have been three amendments since then. Those amendments just clarify where the money goes. As you can see on the fourth bullet there, it provides a payment of $10 million a year to NV2C for them to do the I-66 Commuter Choice Program, and it also gives them $5 million of outside the Beltway money. So NVTC needs to be covered in anything we do here. It established, in addition, a waterfall that designates where all of the revenue from these inside the Beltway tolls come. First and foremost, we pay for the tolling operation and maintenance. VDOT's got to cover that. That has to be covered before anything else is even considered. The line we're talking about today is line number 2. It's debt service on rail components, and what components are. Those are projects that are approved by this body to further transportation. The second line item here is the rail component debt that was envisioned. It's interesting, and I don't know why this is, and I'm not going to offer any judgment, but we can only enter into debt in an amount that would still allow line item 3 to take place, that payment to NBTC. So we will enter debt for the Long Bridge project, for example, or for really anything approved by this board, but we can do it only to a level that ensures that the revenue covers the cost and expense of tolling, and then also the NVTC payment of $10 million going forward. And then you see the rest 4 through 8, the different places where that additional revenue would go. Fast forward to 2020, the Commonwealth of Virginia Passenger Rail Facilities Bond Act of 2020, that legislation asked this board to issue bonds, or gave this board the authority to issue bonds not exceeding $1 billion for Transform Rail in Virginia, specifically Long Bridge. That $1 billion was in our financial plan. This is actually the legislation that created VPRA. We expected that $1 billion to come in. Through the course of time, the toll and revenue estimates has gone down a little bit. What we're expecting now is about $500 million in debt, and that debt would be entered into with VDOT and the US DOT Build America Board, either through TIFIA or through RIF. This agreement that we're talking about today is what would govern the responsibilities for that agreement. So how the agreement would work, it would cover the Long Bridge project that you've heard a lot about. Just going from left to right, we're looking from south to north. What the Long Bridge does in two separate projects that VPRA is managing is it adds a second bridge over the Potomac River and two additional passenger rail tracks, two additional tracks that we dedicated for passenger going from the Long Bridge Aquatic Center up all the way to the Font Plaza. When this is done in 2030, it will give dedicated passenger tracks going all the way from Union Station down into the Arlington, Alexandria area. Two separate projects. They're both well underway. Folks that have been either driving across the 14th Street Bridge or on the train can see the construction is going. We've got cameras that show us, even with the snow, they continue to make progress. We started this with VPRA in 2020. It's really our long pole in the tent, so to speak, and we continue to be on schedule to complete in 2030. The agreement itself, this is the agreement that we'll bring to you later this year. It is between, as I said, VDOT and VPRA. It provides the funding through debt from the US DOT, and you see we have the responsibility, VPRA, of managing the contractors, delivering the project, and our friends at VDOT have the responsibility of negotiating the loan documents with the US DOT and making sure that that's all in place. That's background in the agreement. Ms. Pryor has had, I believe, a long enough break. She's now going to talk about the path forward on the agreement, unless you've got questions for me first.
Any questions for Director Stadler? Pryor?
Thank you, Mr. Stadler. Just to run through the schedule, I'll be coming back to you several times in the coming months regarding this. Just by way of background, we submitted a letter of interest to the Build America Bureau back in October, and we received notification in December that we were being advanced to creditworthiness review. That is beginning now with the Bureau. We're presenting to you the draft project partnership and financing agreement. We'll be bringing that back to you as an action item in March. Moving on, we'll go through the creditworthiness review with the Bureau in the spring and summer. We'll be bringing back to you a plan of finance for your review in fall, as well as to the Treasury Board. We'll request your approval in January to submit a loan application for a TIFIA loan agreement. We'll also go to the Treasury Board with that same request, and then we'll submit the TIFIA loan application. In February, we'll go to the governor for approval for that TIFIA loan, and we expect to receive approval from the Bureau and receive final creditworthiness ratings and then close the loan in March. So I'll be bringing you regular updates on this process. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you, Ms. Pryor. And folks, this is a long-planned debt issuance. This was authorized by the Assembly in 2020 and has been a kind of cornerstone of the Transforming Rail in Virginia financing package. So it's very nice to come back several years later and see it all moving forward as we kind of contemplated at that time, though understand with some of the impacts to traffic because of COVID, we might have slightly lower proceeds than we were hoping for. But overall, still a big component of that financing package. So are there any questions for Ms. Pryor or Mr. Stadler? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Hutchinson on the Shenandoah Valley Rail Trail.
Secretary, good morning again, members. So we've got a short slide for you this morning updating you on the status of this project and the recommended action this afternoon. So some background is just to bring folks up to speed. In 2022, the General Assembly provided funding for the development of several priority trails across the Commonwealth. Included in that appropriation was up to $35 million for the Shenandoah Valley Rail Trail, specifically for land acquisition and planning. The following year, budget language was adopted that amended that section of the budget and added a stipulation that any land acquisition as part of that trail's development would not preclude consideration of options to maintain rail transportation in the corridor. As many of y'all are aware, for the better part of 2 years, VDOT put out 3 reports assessing the constraints, considerations, and costs for constructing a trail alongside the rail line as an alternative to the previously studied rail-to-trail option, which, as y'all remember, was studied by DCR and issued in a report in 2021. So as I mentioned, the assessment by VDOT has gone through 3 phases. The Phase 3 report, as y'all may remember, was released in early December, of last year. Some issues that have bubbled up to the surface through the winter of 2025, 2026 that y'all are aware of are that I think the process that was followed by the previous administration from December through January generated some public concern regarding the transparency of the speed at which that project was moving. There was a commitment, as y'all may recall, from VDOT during the previous administration and articulated in the Phase 3 report published in early December of last year that additional public engagement would proceed following the Phase 3 report. And unfortunately, that process was not followed. And as y'all recall, the CTB took action in December that moved that process forward prior to additional public engagement being able to be received. Apologies, I'm going out a little bit. As the Phase 3 report executive summary stated very clearly, it was the intent and stated goal to provide and summarize the feedback to the Phase 3 report in an addendum that would be published by VDOT. So unfortunately, neither of those 2 processes were able to be completed prior to the actions of CTB and you all in December of last year. There are some other issues that have been identified that fall under that umbrella of the sped up process and the lack of transparency, which are detailed in the proposed resolution for action. So the recommendation is to rescind the January 6th, 2026 CTB resolution to allow the process to move forward as previously articulated last year in both the Phase 2 and Phase 3 reports released to the public. That would include the scheduling and holding of 3 additional public information hearings to fully complete the Phase 3 report process as outlined in the Phase 3 report executive summary released December of last year. At that process, rescinding the resolution will allow the corridor acquisition process to proceed with all deliberate speed. As I mentioned, at the same time that would be allowed to proceed, the 3 public information hearings consistent with the process outlined in the Phase 3 report and consistent with the process followed in the Phase 2 report would be conducted. And as committed in the Phase 3 report, that public feedback would be summarized, compiled, and provided in an addendum in a revised Phase 3 addendum report. I believe that's the last slide, so happy to answer any questions that folks may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchinson. And if folks, if I could just say a few words before we move to any other questions. I want to be really clear about what we are talking about today and what we're asking you to consider in the action meeting. The goal we are seeking to achieve is to complete the public engagement process that we told the public we would do with the release of the Phase 3 report. At the end of the day, the funds we are expending here are taxpayer dollars, and I believe it's appropriate for us to meet the commitments we provide to the public and those taxpayers as we seek to use the dollars they have paid to the state. I am not predetermining what the outcome of this process may be. I understand that this may be frustrating at times for folks, and I apologize for that frustration. What I'm seeking to do is just to move forward with the due diligence we indicated that we would do. The intent is also, I believe it was very, very salient points were made about the need to acquire the right-of-way sooner rather than later, as Norfolk Southern and UP continue the discussions with the Surface Transportation Board about a potential merger moving forward. And so if the board votes in the affirmative today, moving forward, I would direct the commissioner to purchase that right-of-way with Norfolk Southern. There's still a few details that need to be worked out there. I think we have the broad contours of a deal, but having done a number of agreements with railroads, let me assure you, broad contours don't cut it. And so we would move forward expeditiously to go from that high level to a specific agreement. While we are doing that, we have the time to have the discussion with the public about how the corridor is used. Those decisions do not have to be made at the same time. After we acquire the land and complete the public engagement, we may end up saying what was indicated in January is the right course. We may not. I simply don't know. One of the other things, though, that I think is extremely important as we think about this corridor is after the acquisition and the expenditures that were done to date on the studies with VDOT, we will have $11 million left. And so no matter what happens at the end of this process, there is not going to be rail restored to 49 miles of track, nor is there going to be a 49-mile trail. There will be a few miles of trail somewhere in this 49-mile corridor. Because let's just be very candid, $11 million is not going to do anything over in a 49-mile corridor. So I know there's very strong feelings on both sides of this. I hope folks understand I'm not in either camp. The camp I'm in is we told the public we were going to have public meetings, and we should have public meetings before we spend public funds if that's what we told the public we were going to do. And so that is the sole purpose of this. We would, again, acquire the right-of-way with as fast as we can, assuring we get an appropriate deal with the railroad moving forward. And that purchase, very importantly, to a discussion Mr. Minshew and I had yesterday, will comply with the requirements of the Appropriations Act, ensuring that that land acquisition does not preclude the use of that land for future rail along there. And so those will all be followed as we move forward there. But that is the intent of this discussion. If you ask me today, Mr. Donahue, does that mean there will be a trail for 49 miles? Or does that mean there will be rail for 49 miles? My honest answer is I do not know. We do not have the funding to do any of these things. What we do have the funding for is to buy the right-of-way. And so I think we should move forward and do that. We should have the public engagement, and then we should take the time to make the right decision for how we use these 49 miles. And again, that may be the decision that was advanced in January. It may not. I do not know. So I think I've made the point about as strong as I can. At the risk of repeating myself, I'll stop now and see if there's any questions for myself or Mr. Hutchinson, either on the presentation or the resolution before you. Mr. Good?
What are we talking about with this acquisition? Earlier, in the earlier administration, the conversation was they wanted another party to do the acquisition. And what you're suggesting now, does that mean VDOT is actually going to own?
If the board approves the resolution, VDOT would move forward with the acquisition of the right-of-way, yes, sir. And they'd buy the name of the Commonwealth, and then we can, at future times, depending on what is determined to be the appropriate use of that land, we can transfer it to sister agencies or engage in partnerships with other community members as is appropriate.
I'm all in favor. I think time is of the essence. I'm all in favor with proceeding with this, given the railroad potential merger situation. That's not a problem. As far as the public hearings and so forth, I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. I think the public hearings could take place as they were originally promised. I don't know that they were planned, but they were promised. I don't see any reason why that can't occur. It was my motion that we're talking about rescinding. I don't like to make mistakes without taking on the responsibility of correcting the mistakes. I'm concerned, as I think other people were earlier along the way, about the Commonwealth taking this ownership on and the ultimate management of the trail. And where we have other parties who already are in the region and have trails and already an infrastructure to do so, and are accustomed to raising funds for things. And as you've pointed out, it's clear there's not enough funding to do all this stuff. I agree with you totally on that. But there is an entity out there that has routinely raised funds, and not just from VDOT, okay? They're raising them generally from other places, maybe almost exclusively from other places. and I've had quite a bit of experience with that. And I'd hate to lose that opportunity. And I think they've already done some work with the Commonwealth on this that I think possibly is not fully appreciated by us. I've learned just in the last 24 hours about that work that's been done in cooperation with VDOT.
So, Mr. Good, I appreciate those comments, and what I would say in response is, in my mind, nothing that we are recommending to the board, and I stress, you're a board, you have agency on this vote, would preclude anything that you have discussed there. There's nothing to say a partnership could not be done with community members or foundations or other entities in the Shenandoah Valley in the future on this corridor. Like, this does not close that door. I do personally have some concerns about us transferring the funds to the rail authority before we figure out what we are saying, before we have the public engagement to complete the decision-making process on what is the best use of the corridor. Mr. Stadler does a great job at delivering passenger rail projects, but he's not really supposed to be involved in freight rail or, heavily involved in trail, except to the extent that it's a mitigation for a passenger rail improvement, like the trail over the Potomac River is as a part of Long Bridge. And so I don't think any of this forecloses future partnerships with community members there, and that's certainly not my intent.
How do we address the agricultural community that has come out and some of the governments, particularly in Shenandoah County, which a lot of the trails in Shenandoah County runs right kind of through the center of it. How do we address the sincere concerns that they have about keeping what's left of that railroad available for potential future use in whole or in part? How do we address those concerns? There's a lot of concern about we're walking away from that. And I realize you're not saying that.
I was trying to say the exact opposite.
Yeah, I understand that, but there's concern on their part that, we've been told at the federal level that there was an Inflation Reduction Act that I think did nothing but create inflation. So people don't always buy into what we say, unfortunately, with that background. But how do we assure them that we're going to stick to what their concerns are?
So, Mr. Good, I appreciate the comments, and I think what I would say is I'm a new Secretary of Transportation. I have told you about my philosophy in terms of governance and use of taxpayer dollars, and what I'm committing to this community is that we will have this public engagement and that we will take very seriously all of the comments that we receive as we think about future uses of this corridor. So if the board were to approve the resolution that's before them today, it does not make any or adjudicate any decision with regard to the future of rail or the future of trail in this corridor. What it does is it allows us to move forward expeditiously with the acquisition of that rail and engage in public engagement where we will hear from stakeholders on both sides about the potential uses of the corridor. It is not closing the door on trail. It is not closing the door on rail. It is saying that we can move forward with the acquisition, and while we're doing that, continue the public engagement process to think through what might be the best uses. Ultimately, the end of that process could be we have $11 million and we can build trail somewhere that doesn't preclude future rail, and then we haven't made any decisions about the future, and we've left both things open, right? Because there's no funding forthcoming that I see for rail restoration or for additional trail construction, just to be very candid. Like, this is the appropriation that we have. There were no budget amendments in the General Assembly to increase funding available for this section of trail, and so it's my kind of expectation, until someone tells me otherwise, that the $11 million is the fulsome amount of funding we have available to make improvements in this corridor. And so I think we need to listen to the public and take all of that into account, and then we can make a decision that reflects those needs, and it's not foreclosing any partnerships with community members or foreclosing a trail or a rail along that corridor. And I think I would say, in terms of how folks feel about whether they can take the word of a public official, I'm asking you to take my word, I guess, and I'm saying we'll complete these public meetings. We will take in that comment in a meaningful manner, and then we will have a discussion about how we can use that corridor to best meet the needs of the community based on the feedback that we receive.
And I think the intent of the motion in January was that there's, public is still included in meetings, and that was one of the specified things that we wanted the Passenger Rail Authority to deal with. I understand, in talking with Carter yesterday, that that was not one of the responsibilities that in their resolution, internal to the Passenger Rail Authority, that they were going to take on. I thought the solution to that's easy. Just take that off their plate and let VDOT finish what they promised to do, which is what you're suggesting is going to happen anyway. The thing about the partnership with an entity already pretty well positioned to take on the project, which means fundraising and potentially building things to maybe a different standard than maybe VDOT would. VDOT having very high standards, and I don't say that in any derogatory way. I don't want my car falling off of a bridge, but a trail's a trail. It may not need to be built to those specifications that probably would cost a lot more. I think there's some concern about that. And having the fundraising part, moments ago we were talking about funding, and it's a constant ongoing battle. And there's, as you pointed out quite correctly, there's never enough to take care of everything. I think having this separated with sort of another parentage there to get things done takes all that fundraising responsibility. And to a certain extent, the trail is more of a recreational thing than it is a transportation thing. And I think that I'm happy to hear that we would go ahead with the acquisition of the rail, but I want to be cooperative. I want to correct any mistake I made, and a complete rescission of this is, to me, troubling. But I also want to be cooperative and work with everybody and remind all present here that I think the agricultural community and elected officials in the areas most impacted by this rail and a potential reuse of the rail and the trail are dead serious that could have a future. And there are other places where these things have been brought back. Again, I say in whole or in part. It might not be the whole thing. And I want to have it be pleasant and happy and work together. And I know you in this new position want to do the same thing, and I trust you on that. But I'm going to vote against the motion because I think it should be modified to try to accomplish the same goals. I think I owe that to my district and the concerns that the district has that are very sincere. And these are people who are earning a living. They're working there. These are not recreational people who are going to ride a bicycle on the trail. They're not likely to. They're too busy working on their farms and their agricultural pursuits for that. But I think I'll be, as long as I'm here, I'll be reminding everybody that we need to keep those folks in mind.
Mr. Good, I appreciate the comments and the candor. And again, I expect you all to come and represent the communities that you represent here. I would respectfully say I don't think we are foreclosing opportunities to partner with someone on fundraising. In my mind, when we say that, we're predetermining the outcome of a public engagement process that's not yet complete. And so I would just respectfully disagree that is what that vote means, because in my mind, it does not mean that ultimately at the end of the day. It means there's several directions we could go, one of which could be that, and we don't know that yet. I would say there's also a number of other areas in the Commonwealth where the state, VDOT does have partnerships with local foundations specifically for fundraising and enhancement of the trails. And so we have the Virginia Capitol Trail, which was actually one of the first projects I worked on when I was a governor's fellow. And that is a 55-mile trail that runs from Richmond to Jamestown and Williamsburg, and it has the Capitol Trail Foundation for the express purpose of being a partner to fundraise, to promote tourism and enhancements to that trail. We also have the Fall Line Trail currently under construction in this region, and there's a partnership there with sports backers. They have a branded name. I apologize, sports backers. It's like Friends of the Fall Line. I probably butchered that slightly, but that is generically the purpose of that nonprofit partnership. And so, in my opinion, and it's my opinion, and everyone is welcome to different ones, nothing we are doing today forecloses the opportunity for, fundraising partnerships in the future with entities in that community. And, VDOT, I think, has demonstrated with both the Fall Line Trail and the Capitol Trail their ability to successfully enter into those types of partnerships. But I appreciate you expressing your opinion and letting us know your intention. Ms. Sellers?
I would just add that the law or the budget amendment actually protects the option of a rail in the future. So we have to include that. So whether people, trust what a public official says, they can trust the budget language, and that's in there. That we cannot do anything to take that off the table would be the only thing I'd add.
Yes, the land acquisition cannot. That's correct. Dunlap?
Yes, Mr. Secretary, thank you. If we proceed the way the CTB voted at the last meeting, what precludes public meetings?
Ms. Dunlap, I would say nothing precludes or promises future public meetings, but I do think transferring the funds from the designated entity that the General Assembly selected does set in motion a certain kind of set of events. So, for example, VDOT does have a role in trail construction. The Virginia Passenger Rail Authority's express purpose under the law is to promote passenger and commuter rail services. And so by transferring the funds to that entity, we are moving in a certain direction and giving those funds to an entity that has no role in potentially half of what we may be considering in that corridor.
But they could have public hearings on this matter.
They could have public hearings on
Which
this
were
matter. They
promised
could,
to the
yes.
people. Yes. So I guess what I'm saying is you've expressed the concern that public meetings wouldn't be held as a result of this, but they will be. They could be. They could be directed to be.
The authority is independent and has a supervisory board, and so I cannot direct the authority to do any tasks, just to be very explicit about where my authority stops and starts in terms of independent authorities. But the concern I was expressing, perhaps inarticulately, is that we took an action that was moving in a particular direction before we completed the public engagement. So it's not that the rail authority will or will not have public meetings. It's that we made a decision that said we are going to go in a particular direction with regard to the use of that corridor before we completed the public engagement that we told the public we have, that we would consider as we determined how that land would be used. And so it's that we effectively, through that resolution, we're making a decision about the use of the corridor before we completed the public engagement that we said we would complete and consider as we made the determination about how the land would be used.
Well, with all due respect, I don't think that decision was made about how the money would be used and how the corridor would be used. It simply said that the corridor would be purchased and that this board supported the rail and trail concept, but we wanted the land to be purchased so it would become available to be developed. But I don't think anything in the resolution that we approved the last time precluded developing a trail in that area.
Ms. Elva, I did not say that it precluded developing a trail in the corridor. It did make the decision that the full corridor would be rail with trail, which is a decision, to be very clear, about how the land will be used that we made before we completed the public engagement we told the public we would have. That is my concern.
But don't you think that the actual decision that we made was that the rail would be purchased? The rail would be purchased from the railroad, and that there would be then decisions made about how the land that was purchased would be developed. There was no decision made not to include a trail. I mean, I think everybody on this board supports the idea of a trail there. It's just that we do not want to preclude the idea of rail with trail.
So, Ms. Dunlop, to be clear, there was no decision needed by this board to purchase the right-of-way. The General Assembly made that decision when they voted in the affirmative to appropriate $35 million to VDOT for the purpose of land acquisition and planning in this corridor. So the decision on whether to purchase the right-of-way was never a decision of this board. It was a decision made by the General Assembly when they appropriated the funds. So that's my understanding, and I'll leave that to others if they feel differently there. And so the land acquisition was always going to take place. The decision, in my opinion, and it's fine if you feel otherwise on that, is that we told the public before we decided whether it would be a trail, a rail with trail, or a trail with some rail, was that we were going to have public meetings. We then made, in my opinion, this body made the decision through the action in January to transfer the funds to the Rail Authority, which was then in turn supposed to do a secondary transaction with the intent of saying the full 49 miles would be rail with trail at some point. Again, the funding doesn't exist for any of this, right? And to me, that is determining the use of the land before we complete the public engagement. And again, I take no pleasure in having this discussion. I want to be really clear. Like, this isn't what I wanted to be the topic of the greatest discussion at my first meeting of this transportation board that I chaired. So, like, please, if I'm giving anyone the impression I'm relishing this, it's the exact opposite. Again, I appreciate everyone's feedback. Mr. Laird.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I supported the motion that was made and approved at our last meeting. And I certainly understand your position that you want to do it right. And I applaud you for that. I will say that we have, over the period of many years, listened to both sides of the argument. We also received some 2,000 plus emails that I doubt we're going to hear any different comments at a public hearing that we've already heard through email. There were some good points made, and they were taken into consideration. My big concern, and I just want to state that, is that this needs to stay, the rail needs to stay available to the corridor. And anything not protecting the rail, I will have to vote against.
And so, Mr. Laird, I don't see anything in the resolution before you that predetermines that outcome. Again, the Appropriation Act's language is very clear about the land acquisition. Mr. Mitchell.
First, Mr. Secretary and Mr. Hutchinson, I want to thank you for stating that there's going to be some fealty respected to the budget language that's put in that 2024 appropriation. As I read that, that language is kind of like a congressional earmark that they used to do on Capitol Hill in Washington, where they'd say, here's money to buy a 5-ton air conditioning unit, but you have to use it to cool off the emergency room in your community hospital. They put a restriction on that use, and as I read that language, it's not as precise as I'd like to see. You sometimes don't see this kind of precise language that's of statutory quality coming out of the Senate Finance Committee or House Appropriations, but I think the intent there is use this money, acquire the 49 miles of railroad right-of-way, and use it for this purpose, and to the greatest extent feasible, maintain viability of rail in that corridor. That's why I read that. And I appreciate you and Mr. Hutchinson noting that. Sometimes we forget about that language that's kind of uncodified law baked into the budget, but the fact that both you and Mr. Hutchinson have expressed support for respecting that language is one that I think is quite good and appreciated.
So I guess the final comment I would just make is I understand the points that others are making. If this were a roadway project and we told the public we were going to conduct an additional set of public meetings and then we didn't, and then we moved forward with that improvement, we would be getting a lot of grief for that discussion, whether we liked or didn't like the direction what we moved. We may ultimately end up in the same place, but when we use the public's money, and from my perspective, it is imperative that we keep the commitments to the public that we made to them before we do so. That is the basis for why I'm asking you to take this action later today. It is not foreclosing a potential direction in either way, right? So I want to be very clear there, but that is why I've felt it necessary to bring this forward. And so I appreciate everyone's feedback. I know we're going to hear more based on the sign-up sheet that I see here today. So again, I appreciate the public also coming to give their perspective as well on that, and I mean that very sincerely. But to me, that is what is important as this body operates, is that when we tell the public we're going to do something, we then do it. So again, thank you. Ms. Schul?
Right. So today, I'm going to give a 7-slide presentation telling you about a recommendation we're going to make to add just 2 words to a policy you adopted 2 years ago. So that's the big picture context. So the background is SmartScale. As you know, SmartScale is the quantitative process we use to determine where we're going to invest our infrastructure dollars. There are 2 pockets of money, as I think Ms. Pryor previously referred to, the High Priority Projects Program and the District Grant Program. Each of those programs has different rules of eligibility. And the reason this matters is because if a project is eligible for both, it effectively gives it a higher shot at being funded because it has a bigger pool to apply to. So that's the case for why these decisions on what's eligible matter. There's also the district grant programs get funded in order of SmartScale score for their district, and then we fund the HPP projects in the order of state priority and score. For the DGP, the main eligibility requirement is that it hits one of these 4 categories identified by VTrans and that it comes from a locality. So we're not going to talk about DGP eligibility anymore. We're going to talk about HPP eligibility. So HPP projects must be in a corridor of statewide significance or address a need on a regional network, and those are all well established by VTrans. That hasn't changed. That's always been the case for HPP. Just as more background, 2.5 years ago in December of 2023, y'all added some additional requirements to be eligible for HPP. In particular, you said not only does it have to be on one of these corridors, but it also has to contain a feature from a list that was developed of features that also match our definition of what is high priority. So that's just a refresher on what happened. By the way, if the term step 2, which I used on the previous slide, rings a bell, there used to be 3 steps. So now when I'm talking about step 2, we're talking about the old step 3, which became the new step 2. Let's talk about that.
Don't worry about the steps.
Let's talk about the projects. So what we see on the slide is the list of features that a high priority project must contain. And as a reminder, the language from the law says that high priority means regional or statewide significance, such as a project that reduces congestion, increases safety, accessibility, environmental quality, or economic development. So this list was developed of project types that further those aims. Our suggested addition is to add a project type called innovative intersections. We are asking and recommending this change right now, which I know is right before applications are due to come in. We also know that changing rules for SmartScale right before applications start can be stressful. So we focused on this improvement because, first of all, it doesn't take anything away in terms of eligibility, it merely expands. So nobody who was planning to submit for something that was HPP eligible is going to have that taken away. It's just that this subset of projects that might just have been eligible for DGP now will also be eligible for HPP. So it only expands your option. It doesn't limit what anybody is planning to do.
And Ms. Schul, really quick, before you leave this point, so it also does not change how any project is evaluated, right? And so, that is something that I think would potentially change the projects people might submit. If we said, hey, we're going to measure congestion this way, we're going to look at safety in some other way we haven't before. That might cause people, I think, to change the type of project, to pick a different project that they submit within the application caps for SmartScale. This is simply saying that there are certain types of projects that we think should be eligible for both programs, and that we're not changing any way in which the projects are evaluated.
So it is a very narrow change. So you might be asking, what is this thing? What could I call an innovative intersection? In fact, it is a very clearly defined type of intersection. There is a program run by VDOT called the ICAP Framework, which is the Innovative Intersections Committee. It balances and does a lot of research on where an intersection could be changed to contain one of these more innovative techniques. Roundabout is considered an innovative technique. U-turn with a cut, innovative technique. These are not, I would say, wildly innovative things that might seem unfamiliar. These are things that are familiar to you as you drive around your communities. Also, there is a really clear way these are defined. There won't be any ambiguity in what's included and what's not. And this is the partner, or rather, there's a subset of this program called Innovative Interchanges. Innovative interchanges are included in your list of HPP eligible features, but innovative intersections are not. What is the difference? An interchange has a grade separation, like an off-ramp coming down to the road. An interchange is all at an intersection is all at the same grade. So as you will see, what I'm leading up to is that this exclusion of the innovative intersections leads to some arbitrary outcomes, and it would be more fair to our project applicants and get us more of the results we want to see as high priority outcomes if we include this class. So here's an example. So the project I'm showing you was, in the last round, the highest scoring project for safety in the state. It was an innovative intersection project because VDOT and the regions have been promoting innovative intersections for years as something that's of priority to invest in. This was on Route 360. It's a big road. It was a big, impactful project, $45 million. It would have been eligible for HPP, except that it didn't have any interchanges. It only had intersections. It was thus not eligible, and because it's pretty sizable, it ended up unfunded in the round. So this is the type of project that catches our eye when we say, hey, how can we defend these decisions? Why wasn't our best scoring safety project funded? This is a very narrow change that will fix and clean up some of those types of issues. Just to put this in context, on the next slide, you see the project I just described to you, which is the red project on the bottom, next to two other projects that are all on the same corridor, all dealing with the same safety issues on that turnpike. The middle one, which is green, was HPP eligible, but the two next to it, which are clearly part of the same project, have a lot of the same features, were not. That's the type of arbitrary outcome we're just looking to clean up here.
And Ms. Schul, just to focus on this a little bit, talking about the green and red project. The red project was ranked 27th in the state overall in terms of effectiveness and was not funded. So again, in terms of the benefits relative to the dollars, it did well. The green project was funded, and it ranked like 72nd in terms of effectiveness. And if you take a look at like the detailed scope there, it did modify an interchange ramp, but I don't think it like rebuilt an interchange. The changes there were all focused about what was happening on Route 360, which is the US highway, kind of in question here. And so I personally would struggle if I was standing in front of, for example, like the House Transportation Committee, and they said, well, like Mr. Minshew, if you were still in that committee and we were there, and you said, Mr. Donahue, I want to know why the green one, which was 72nd, was funded over this one below it that was 26. I would struggle to articulate a kind of a strong rationale as to the distinction between the two projects because they were both aimed at improving traffic flow and safety on Route 360. It's just one touched an interstate ramp or an interchange ramp, and the other did not.
All right, similar example, now we're closer to Charlottesville. This is an innovative interchange, which was eligible. It contains almost all the same features and goals as the Richmond project we just saw, scored lower. And again, it is, on the next slide, it is the blue one. It is immediately adjacent to another project with many of the same features which was not funded, but the blue project had roundabouts that were added to the bottom of the off-ramps, so worked with an interchange, thus was funded. Again, doesn't seem like it's achieving the goals we want of really focusing on our high priority projects, and that's why we're recommending this change. I won't go through in detail the rest of the slides unless you have questions. What I've done is I've pulled an innovative interchange from different districts, an innovative intersection from different districts. Some of them were funded in DGP, some of them weren't, some of them are a little smaller, some of them are quite large. What you can see in all of them is that they're good projects that scored quite high in our Smart Scale score and scored higher than other projects that were funded because of the eligibility in that district. So if you have any questions about any of those, happy to answer them, or about the concept in general.
Well, and Ms. Sellers, really quick before you go to questions, a number of changes were made in December of '23 in terms of the eligibility for high priority projects. This leaves the vast majority of them in place, right? And so I think there were concerns expressed at that time about extremely small streetscape or bike ped or, just like turn lane types of projects kind of getting in high priority because they were so small. These changes will not affect any of those kind of modifications that were made in December. What we're really focused on here is projects on primary routes where we're doing intersection improvements where the difference between that and the ones that do the interchange improvements is very hard from our perspective to kind of ascertain. And all the discussion we've had today about the limited construction dollars that we have available, we want to be focusing on the projects that are driving the greatest benefit relative to their costs. And again, personally, just moving an interchange ramp over so it connects with the roundabout and becoming eligible because you've touched an interchange versus doing intersection improvements and being the top safety project and not being eligible, that's just, it creates some difficulties for me to be able to articulate that to the public and other types of stakeholders. And so that's why we're asking you to consider this modification. I want to be very clear, you're not voting today. This is a March decision. So we want to just get this in front of you, but also make sure the applicant community was aware that we were potentially talking about this, again, expanded eligibility, not changing how any project is evaluated. Ms. Sellers?
I take a lot of interest in Smart Scale, and the removal of that step 2 created this gap in the policy. And the number one, and it's interesting you focus on HPP, because the number one project in the state along Route 1 in Caroline County, and based on what I looked at, the first time a rural district has ever come in number 1, was deemed ineligible for HPP because of some study that had to be done, and it didn't check that box. So my concern here is that we're not looking at it holistically, and that this is going to create some ripple effect that we're going to find out when we start putting dollars and saying this one's getting funded. And, you know, can go back to May. I wasn't very happy at the district, you know, when we met as a district and learned why that project was not eligible for HPP money, when it met every criteria of the code. So I'm gonna have to look at this and see what it does. Because I do have every time we mess with Smart Scale, it doesn't do what we think it's gonna do. And I would much rather us look at the allocation later on and do something else. So I don't know about this one. I mean, I hear you, but.
So, Ms. Sellers, if I could clarify, you cannot look at the allocation later on if the policy says it's not eligible.
Why not? It doesn't, in the code, I mean, it says we can.
So, well, let me state that differently. I would highly advise against this body taking actions to modify the policy after we've gone all the way through evaluating projects and changing the rules at the end of the day. So you could not say in January or April, say, you know what, I wish this was eligible for high priority, I want to fund it with it, without changing the policy as well.
Well, I don't disagree. In this case, there was a gap that we created because we removed step 2. And so you have HPP, you have DGP, but you also have this category of both. And under our current policy, both gets funded under DGP first, regardless of if it qualified for both programs. And so I would ask, would these projects be funded if you changed that? And you said, based on order that they come in, the top projects, if they're eligible for HPP or both, get funded first through HPP, and then the district grant comes into play. Because right now it's the other way, where DGP money is allocated first, and then HPP money comes into play. And so what it caused is all of these, like, I don't want to call them mediocre, but they weren't the best scoring projects when you look at the HPP. And the overall, and I have all the numbers, I don't have them here with me today, but when you start getting into the numbers, it did drive down the overall score of HPP. And it is something that I did bring up at the last round. But so I would be curious if that would fix this problem and be a more holistic approach than just going and adding this interchange. But I don't know.
So we can definitely look into the scenario and get you information before the March vote. I will say that because projects start submitting in 2 weeks, we are trying to be conservative in the level of changes we make because so much work has been put in by the districts to prepare these projects for the past year. And I also know from talking to the team that works on Smart Scale that I agree, I have heard there was confusion about the nuances of the eligibility changes last time. And a lot of the education work that has been done over the last 2 years has been making sure that people who submit really get it, right? So that at least there won't be surprises.
I also want to say, we're under no illusion that the smart scale process is perfect, and candidly, like, I don't think anyone will ever consider it perfect. So this is not the last opportunity this board will have to discuss broader sets of changes to the smart scale policy, but I would personally recommend, as Ms. Schul noted, making large-scale changes to how the process works. I think what we have done is, when we looked at the results for last time and we just saw high-scoring projects skipped at the top, and we'll certainly take a look at the project you noted there, we said, well, why was this skipped? And candidly, it was skipped because the project didn't touch an interchange ramp, and there's projects below that touch an interchange ramp to move it to go into a roundabout that were eligible because they had to move the ramp because the roundabout is bigger than a traffic light. I personally, I struggle to defend that distinction. And so by expanding this definition, we don't have to defend that distinction because it ceases to exist. And I don't think anyone loses anything from this minor expansion in the eligibility. And again, we're not blowing the doors off and going back to how it was before it was tightened up in the previous round. It's just this one particular change where, again, we're talking about primary highways. It has to be a corridor of statewide significance or regional network. And I just think the distinction today between, is that roundabout go to an interchange ramp, or is that roundabout at two primary highways? It's hard to explain why one is so much more impactful, particularly when one project scored so much higher than another. And so that's, I think, the perspective that we're coming at. I want to be clear. We're going to have a lot of discussions about smart scale. We will talk about how it works. I expect you're going to have some strong opinions, maybe is the way I'll phrase that. But I would say that as we literally open the portal in a few weeks for applicants, let's not make huge changes at this time, but we do think that this minor modification to the eligibility will improve the process.
Secretary.
Mr. Lawson.
Do we have any understanding, if we're going to add these intersections, do we have any understanding of the magnitude of the cost of these things? And what kind of a hit is it going to impose on the HPP funds?
Mr. Lawson, I think what I would say is these projects, I think, range anywhere from $10 to $50 million. I wouldn't consider it a hit on HPP. What I would consider is, Laura, Ms. Schul, if you could go back to the map of the Route 360 corridor in Richmond, what I expect the anticipated impacts of this to be, which I think is kind of what you're asking, is on this map, the project in green was 72nd in the state overall, and it was funded because it touched an interchange ramp. The project in red was not funded, even though it was 26. The cost of these two projects is essentially the same. I think there were about $5 million in difference, and so I don't consider it a hit, if you will, to HPP. It just changes the makeup of what gets funded. And so in this example, the red project, which had more benefits relative to its cost, would have been funded, and the green project wouldn't have been, because it was one of the last projects funded out of HPP. So that's kind of how I try to think about the distinction.
I understand. What I'm trying to get at is, do we have any, here we are getting close to this, do we have any feel for the total value of these intersection improvements if we make this change that could be eligible?
So we don't know yet what agencies and localities are going to submit. Within DGP, and because of the work VDOT and the community have done, there are a ton of innovative intersection projects that are being looked at in all sorts of ways by localities, right? Because they've been proven by these studies to be very cost-effective way to reduce congestion, improve safety at intersections. So I suspect there will be plenty, but there were plenty last time when they weren't eligible. They just all got pushed into DGP.
Mr. Lawson, I think I understand your question. You're trying to say if there was $2 billion last time that was eligible for HPP, what will it be this time? I think to Ms. Schul's point, we don't know exactly what that will be because the applications aren't in. We can take a look at the last round and give you a sense based on the past there. But one thing I do want to stress is we're not saying any innovative intersection. You still have to meet the requirements of the code. Because again, I think as Mr. Minshew noted earlier, we are always going to follow the law. Like the law is the law, and we operate within the confines of that. And so you still have to be on a corridor of statewide significance or address a regional network. And so this isn't going to be an innovative intersection at two secondary highways or something of that nature. It's still going to be on these higher order kind of roadway networks there. But that being said, we can take a look at the past round and kind of seek to get you some information in advance of the March meeting.
Thank you.
Mr. Secretary.
1 second, Mr. Gribben.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm going to agree with Ms. Sellers in terms of having a more holistic view would be helpful, and I understand you say we're going to get to that at some point. I think one of the challenges that we had from January is we rushed into a decision. I'd like to get back to a more regular cadence of decision-making where we're looking at things a little further ahead. I think making change to smart scales has probably been the most controversial thing. Well, the second Shenandoah Trail, the second most controversial thing that we've worked on as a board. I wonder if there's just maybe not an easier way to resolve this in terms of how you define a project. If what we're talking about is adjacent projects where one is qualified and one's not, can we just not can we combine these into one project and redefine where the project is that then makes the entire thing eligible? So actually, but go ahead.
I would say certain localities have done that to try to get to the eligibility. It does drive up the total cost of the project, so sometimes it gets it so big that it doesn't make sense to submit.
Correct, and that raises another concern in terms of the extent to which cost drives the score in smart scales, and the extent to which cost does or does not scale with benefits under the smart scales formula currently. So it's part of why, instead of taking this patchwork approach, which I was not here the last time this happened, but the feedback I've received, that didn't result exactly the way, as Ms. Seller said, that we anticipated would result. That maybe we take a step back and think about that. The other point is the order in which we consider high priority versus district. That's created in Northern Virginia District a lot of challenges in terms of, okay, well, do we fund this from the district grant because we're not sure if we're going to win at the high priority, so we end up funding all of our programs there and then scoring really low on the high priority. It's a level of gamesmanship, at least in our district, that has not been helpful. And so maybe flipping that order and then changing the definition of project, and I'm just making it way before you want to go, further you want to go, Mr. Secretary, but then thinking about how the formula works in terms of scaling costs with benefits. In high costs districts, we inevitably will lose, because if we have twice the cost and twice the benefits, we score lower. And that's something I would hope to address at time. But this aside, I appreciate, Mr. Secretary, your willingness to open this up and have a more holistic conversation about how smart scale works, because at the end of the day, it is absolutely brilliant that we don't politically allocate dollars to projects based upon the power of the project proponent, but based upon the benefit that project brings to Commonwealth. That puts us way ahead of most of the nation. So I don't want to lose sight of the fact that this is an incredibly effective program, but as applied, especially as we do these patchwork fixes, it's a bit chaotic, and going back to the transparency issue, it's actually opaque and hard for people to understand how does this work and how do I succeed.
So, Mr. Griffin, I appreciate those comments, and I support your inclination generically towards holistically versus patchwork. I think the reason we have reluctantly brought to you this patchwork solution is, in my opinion, this stands out like a sore thumb, kind of the distinction here, and I welcome folks who would help me explain this to elected officials, to ask the difference between the green and the red project, because I personally just can't. And so when I can't do something, I feel it's my responsibility to come to you to say, let's do it differently. And so my commitment to you is that we will do a holistic review of smart scale in due course. Second to that, though, my ask of you is this to me is something that I can't explain to the public or to elected officials. It's a very minor change. It has no opportunity cost for our applicants in terms of taking something away from them. And so I think it is something that we can consider on a one-off basis as we approach around. But you do have my commitment that we will do a wholesale and holistic review of smart scale on a number of issues that you, Ms. Sellers, and I'm sure every other member of the board has some thoughts, they just haven't said them yet in terms of how it works.
It's like one last follow-up question, and you're kind of the expert in smart scale, so you would know this. I'm assuming that intersections weren't included because high priority projects are supposed to be regional or statewide benefits, and intersections tend to have relatively small amounts of traffic, and interchanges were. Is that why there was, and so part of the question is, if we bring intersections into this, are we taking high priority out of projects that have true regional benefit to ones that are much more local?
So the answer, in my opinion, and I wrote the smart scale statute, I wrote the high priority project statute, and I wrote the district grant program statute, and I wrote the amendments to those statutes as well, is because of how high priority projects works, we are not moving away from that intent because we are still constrained to needs identified on a corridor of statewide significance or in a regional network. So said differently, we are still focused on those higher order needs. We're not focused on any need identified in the long-range plan. So again, there's 4 categories of needs in that plan. High priority under the code is limited to corridors of statewide significance and regional networks, whereas district grant program is any need identified in that long-range plan. And so I think with that distinction, which again is in the code, we cannot as a board move away from that. We are meeting the intent of that statute. Oh, Mr. Smoot? And then
Mr. Secretary, I appreciate the acknowledgement that there may be other changes around the table here that people wish to have considered in smart scale.
I've heard a few suggestions on my one-on-one calls, so I know there's more than one.
Well, good. And of course, we all get to interact with elected officials also who have questions about some of the things we're doing. This particular project here seems to me to be a bit one-off, which is not something I recall the way we have approached smart scale in the past. It makes good sense, I think. But I hope we will hear some more, and not necessarily today, about how we can lift up other concerns or proposed changes in smart scale before we move into round 7, as we're doing here before we move into round 7, so that they can be considered. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that sentiment, Mr. Smoot. We will take that under consideration, and we will be back to the board on that. Give us some time to think about that. I would encourage us, particularly after the applicant portal opens, to not change how we're evaluating projects, because that could change the type of projects that people submit. That being said, this board has agency to make those decisions, and so we can have that discussion. But I also want to say we do hit a point where the staff has to set up the mousetraps, for lack of a better term, for how they're going to undertake the Herculean work of validating these applications and scoring these projects. And so to speak for them, because they don't have a microphone where they can speak up, because I'm sure they would if they could, like, there is a certain point where we have gone past the point of no return. And so I really want to stress that. And I think some of these bigger changes may require an amount of discussion that would take us past that point of no return, but we will look into that and come back to you all. But we will have a lot more discussions about smart scale. One, just going through how it works, why it works that way, and talking about those things, because I think one of you made a reference that it feels opaque. That's bad, right? Like we should seek to reduce the opacity of this. If the goal is transparency, that's a problem, if that's how people feel about some of those outcomes. And so we need to work on that. Again, reluctantly, we bring this to you because I personally do not know how to defend the distinction between these projects Ms. Schul presented to an elected official if they asked me. And so again, as you think about this one-off change, which we don't hope to do on a regular basis, I would think about how would you argue for that distinction in the policy? Because if we keep it, that's the position we're all going to be in when we go to these hearings. If we change it, then we don't have to do that. And so I just want to kind of put that out there as maybe the final word on this as we consider this from between now and the March meeting. Oh, sorry, Mr. Minshew, I forgot you had raised your hand.
Thanks, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary. In addition to the point that the Secretary raised, I like this concept because I've seen in the past 8 years design engineers doing some things outside the box with respect to innovative intersections that Mr. Bridge can explain far better than I can. But I'll give you an example. Up in Fairfax County, for those of you who have drove down Route 7, at Lewinsville Road, there was an improvement done there. I think they called it displaced left turn lanes. I never thought it was going to work when they designed it, but I've seen that functioning at high load PM peak hour conditions, and it works extraordinarily well. And I'm told that the cross increment of doing that was not that much. So you got much more of a bang out of your limited bucks. And it sounds like this change will incentivize some of that, pretty innovative thinking on design on intersections. And for that reason, I think it's a good thing. Did I get that right, Mr. Bridge? Displaced left turn lanes?
I just have one
Ms. Sellers?
Can you, before we vote on it, can we actually see what you're changing? Because, I mean, this seems helpful, but like show in either the technical guide or whatever the policy is.
Absolutely.
What is actually being changed so that we can see it and the public can see it before we vote?
Sure. I can show-
Absolutely.
Yes, and I can show you also right afterwards, but we will definitely put that in the resolution. There's basically the equivalent of this table is written in the policy.
Thank you, Ms. Schul.
Yeah.
Next, we have Director Zimmerman.
Thank you. And I think we can go to my slide deck. And we can go right to the next page. Right to the next page, please. There we go. So I'm happy to give you some updates on a number of different things happening in the rail and the transit work across the state. First off, just some high-level public transportation updates. We saw, again, ridership increasing for the state, which is great. We'll talk a little bit more about that in some of the future slides where we can see we've broken that down a little bit. But I did want to highlight the Virginia Breeze intercity bus service to make sure everyone on the CTB is aware. We are opening up a new 5th line that will be happening. We're hoping to do that later this spring, probably late April. And this will be connecting, really providing service, east-west service along the I-64 corridor from Harrisonburg to Virginia Beach with stops in between. And so for those of you who might want to join us at the ribbon cutting, we certainly would invite you to that. It is the first east-west connection that we'll have with the Breeze service, so we're very excited about that. Also noting, we've had a lot of our transit agency folks who've been in town this past month, which has been great for me to get to meet folks, but also a lot of discussions that we've been having about public transit issues, certainly some of the challenges around rising operating and capital costs for public transit, and how can we help agencies better address some of those, both through some of the technical assistance for the ways the state is intervening and through things like our merit review process. So let's go to the next slide. We actually, my very first day on the job, we had a TSDAC meeting to talk about the merit review process. Dr. Smoot was there. I think I've heard more about this issue than anything else since I started the job. Where there's still a lot of questions that people have of finding proposed changes a little bit opaque, kind of hard to understand. Looking at the 1 year of analysis that we saw on performance data raised some questions for some folks. And so we've had discussion with TSDAC, with staff, heard consistently from the industry, still wanting to have more time to really better understand any proposed changes and making sure that we are making the best decisions possible that are going to work both for our rural transit providers, those in small communities, but also in some of our larger systems. Again, this change this merit formula does not apply to WMATA or VRE. It's the 38 other public transit agencies that we have. So we are proposing for the CTB to take action to provide a little bit more time to be able to do some additional analysis. This does not change the timeline for implementation. We will still meet the implementation timeline that in the December applications, that's where you'll start to see the change, where we'll announce that. So taking action in October instead of in June allows us more time for input and, most importantly, more time for analysis that will utilize data, performance data we'll be getting in April. So we can use that data to kind of see one of the goals that we have is to make this formula less opaque, more clear to understand what are the factors that drive that, so that agencies themselves can see if I'm making performance improvements. And Dr. Smoot talked about what do we mean by good performance. So let's have a formula that shows if you are doing cost efficiencies, if you are increasing ridership, if you are increasing revenue, how does that get reflected in the formula, in the allocation that you receive? It is in some ways a zero-sum game, so we will always have winners and losers as we are allocating these funds, but we would like to be able to ensure that we've really looked at different scenarios that, again, are not going to be penalizing agencies that are trying to do good performance, cost-cutting operational efficiencies, growing ridership, getting good customer service. So we think it'll be helpful to have this new data to do that analysis. And again, it won't change our timeline for implementation. So we hope this is something that you can approve, and happy to discuss that a little bit more if needed. We will also, with our engagement, be able to use the time when we'll be talking to many of the communities anyhow about the proposed SIP to also kind of share with them some information on the changes being proposed for merit. So we think that giving us that little extra timeline gets us through the FY27 SIP, moves us into really a good grounding for this future formula change that we can come back to you and hopefully get that approval in October. So next slide. I know a number of folks have talked and reached out to me about the UP-NS merger. Just wanted to update folks on that. Last month, the STB did come back to say there were some technical problems with the merger application that was proposed. And so actually today is the date that UP and NS have to inform the STB. Are they going to be resubmitting sort of a revised application? We anticipate that, yes, they will be submitting a revised application. Probably we will see that in the next month or so. DRPT has joined Virginia Passenger Rail Authority and the port in just submitting a notice of intent to participate. We as a Commonwealth, if we do submit any formal comments, we'll do that in a coordinated fashion across our agencies and through the Secretary. But just wanted you to know we feel it's important, given our interest on the freight side as well, to make sure that we're tracking what happens with that. And then we also, as you heard from Director Statler, Long Bridge construction began in January. There have been service changes, so maybe you are hearing from folks in your districts about those. Some, because we only have a construction window between 7 and 7 currently, there were some lines, particularly coming out of Norfolk, that have moved to bus instead of rail, adjustments to schedule. So please feel free to let folks know. There's a lot of information about this on the DRPT website, on Amtrak's website, but we'll likely see some impacts to ridership as a result of that. But it's pretty exciting to see the work that's currently underway and just getting started. So our next slide, please. Dates, you heard a little bit, very briefly highlighted by Ms. Pryor when she was talking about things. For the Commonwealth Mass Transit Fund, we do have a revenue increase both from FY26 to FY27, and that's projected out looking into the future of a total of $164.5 million projected increase for the CMTF. That is then being reflected in increases that we have to the different programs that are funded through the Commonwealth Mass Transit Fund, the merit capital and operating, the funding that goes to VRE, the funding for our TRIP program, and some other things through that. This is not the total amount that we have, because there are also other sources of funding for public transportation. That includes some of our toll revenues, some of the funding that comes off the board for WMATA. So some of those revenues, we're seeing a little bit of decline, but it's projected for the CMTF overall that's projected to increase. We do have a reserve that we do keep in there in case there are some variations in what we're seeing, which we did see even this last year. The government shut down, delayed getting 5310 funds out to our small rural agencies that rely on that funding. And so it's important as we look at kind of what's happening, are there ways that we can utilize all of our resources to be able to support that? The Commonwealth Rail Fund, again, we do see an increase that is projected for that. That primarily, that increase goes to VPRA. Our freight, both our Rail Preservation Fund and the Freight, Rail, and Planning Fund, slight increases, but remaining pretty consistent across the projected revenues for that. So our application window just closed on February 1st. Not surprisingly, we have a lot more demand for our resources than we have available, but we're in the process of reviewing those, and we'll come back to you later this spring with recommendations for use of that in the SIP. We can go to the next slide. Just updating, in addition to myself, Alan Fye, who's in the room, you can wave, Alan, is our new Chief Deputy Director. Some of you may know Alan. He's worked a long time in the transit industry. He was with the City of Alexandria. He was also with the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission. We were very happy to bring him back from California, back to Virginia, where he belongs, to be part of the DRPT leadership team. And then we also have a few other positions that are currently open or have just closed that we'll be filling for the agency to get us back up to being pretty much fully staffed. So next slide, please. Looking at ridership statewide, you can see the statewide transit calendar year ridership through November was 138 million. By comparison, for November of 2024, it was 137.5 million. So we can say, even without the December numbers, that last year's ridership exceeded the previous year's ridership. And so part of that leg that you see in November reflects the federal government shutdown, which impacted VRE and WMATA, two of our big transit systems. If we go to the next slide, you can see that. I won't belabor the point, but you can just see when we look at year-over-year data, how that impacts things. Despite the hit to November, ridership was still up 2% year over year statewide, and we saw for WMATA it was up 5%. For VRE, ridership was up 29% year over year. Next slide is just looking at Virginia Breeze. Additional information on this and on the following slide. Here you can see again, Virginia Breeze transported 8,300 people in November. It had a really strong November. November was a little weird this year with the way Christmas, Thanksgiving fell. All of the Thanksgiving bump was captured in November. So when you see the December ridership, usually you get like students going home in November and coming back maybe in December. This year, that's all in November, which gave Virginia Breeze a nice extra bump for that. So, and then next slide is just showing our Amtrak ridership. We can go to the next one. Next one on Amtrak, please. There we go. So for Amtrak, you can see with our 4 key routes there, 3 out of the 4 saw ridership growth that happened. Only the Newport News route saw a decline, and that was attributed to a week of service outage that happened along that line. But otherwise, again, we're seeing steady monthly ridership. This will be impacted, we expect, somewhat by what's happening with the Long Bridge construction and the change to service, but still a lot of growth that's happening on these routes, which is really exciting. And then the last slide is just showing how we perform against some of our peers. Virginia is the top blue line there, and you can see in contrast to Pennsylvania, New York, and the North Carolina line, we are exceeding our peers. So we want to keep doing that, being Virginia proud, and getting our riders where they need to be across the state. So that is the director's report. Any questions? Or?
Thank you, Director Zimmerman. Any questions? Commissioner?
Mr. Secretary, members of the board, I have an abbreviated set of comments. Next month, I'll have to bring slides and other things to be able to highlight the many things that we have ongoing. So, but in all seriousness, I want to send a kudos out to our snow fighters, our men and women of the agency, as well as our contract workforce that did a yeoman's job at the incredible storm that we had. It's been more than 10 years since the Commonwealth has experienced a Commonwealth-wide storm. We were in planning conversations with our team and the new administration probably 7 days in advance, watching the storm come across the West Coast, affect the entire southeastern states. I'll say that we were in conversations with my counterparts trying to identify if there were additional snow plows, motor graders, heavy equipment, salt, chemicals that could be replaced throughout as this storm approached and throughout the storm. So we have seen 20 plus days of sub-freezing temperatures in the Commonwealth that has been very unique to our recovery mission that we've had. But our interstates were clear, our primaries were clear, and our high-volume secondaries were clear within 24 to almost 48 hours after it. Now, we have been getting some dialogue about how our performance was within the subdivision streets, but I will say that the snowcrete, as it's been termed, has impacted everyone, not only VDOT, but also our municipal friends and our states to the north and south. So I'm very thankful for the warm temperatures that we're going to experience this week and leading into next week. But with those warm temperatures do come potholes. So I'm happy to announce that tomorrow morning we'll be sending out a press release encouraging the public to be able to call in those potholes and identify where they are so that we can get them filled in a timely manner. There are two ways to do it. Go through our web-based form, which is my.vdot.virginia.gov, to be able to fill out a form, or they can always call the 1-800-367-ROAD to be able to get a member of our customer service center to be able to help identify where that pothole is so that we can get that filled in a timely manner. You're going to see there's a common theme, and what the Secretary and Ms. Pryor have indicated, we are still in a period that we are tallying the expenditures from this winter's weather events as well as other events that have occurred elsewhere within the Commonwealth that have impacted our emergency budget. This may be news to the Secretary, but I doubt it, that our $220 million...
Always what you want to hear.
Yes. The $220 million fund has been expended. The question at this point is how much has it been overexpended at this point in time? And we will be back in March to be able to highlight what that expenditure is. We're still in the midst of tallying those figures. And so, again, March will be when we're back in front of you identifying what those expenditures have been, just in time for Ms. Pryor to start loading up the April budget, as she has indicated that we'll be back in front of you with that being said. So I'm going to keep my comments much more to the impacts to the maintenance program, the snow, and I think our very good response keeping up our roadways free of snow within a timely manner, ensuring safe travel, but also economic competitiveness across the East Coast. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any questions for the Commissioner? All right, seeing none. I think we're at the last agenda item, which is my update. First, I just want to thank you all, for being here today and for taking time to serve on this board. I know we reward you handsomely for your time. So again, just really do appreciate it. I also want to really just second the Commissioner's thanks to the teams that worked around the clock during the multiple snowstorms that we had. The whole state was hit that first go around, but we had pockets across the state that were also hit with several inches several other times after that, and I just think the VDOT team did a spectacular job, and so I really just want to applaud the Commissioner and all the other folks at VDOT who did so much during those times to keep the rest of us safe and to try and clear the roads as fast as possible, even with the snowcrete. So again, thank you, Commissioner, to you and your team. The only final thing I want to say today is we will be coming in March back to you guys, and I've mentioned this to those of you I've been able to speak with individually, with kind of an agenda schedule covering a 2-year period here, and so I wanted to say that out loud so the public also knows that's something we'll be talking about. And again, the ideas I've discussed is creating some expectations so you all know what we'll be talking about at meetings in the future. That means, 1, you know what's coming. 2, you can tell if something's not coming that you think should be, and we can discuss that matter. And then 3, our goal is to hopefully get you materials in a more timely manner because we have set a cadence for when things will be discussed. So there should be no surprises on our end, no surprises on your end. I'd ask for your grace as we transition into this process. I am certain we will occasionally screw up, but we are going to work to get things to you sooner. I know it's been a long-standing concern of this board that runs through many administrations, so I've heard this when I sat at a different table from folks at this board. So what I want to say is I've heard you. We're going to work on that, and I hope that this calendar will also help us kind of with that, but it will also lay out, when we'll be talking about various policy items and kind of moving through the programs and considering those as a board, which I hope you'll find helpful as we move forward. So that concludes the workshop agenda. I have a question for board members. So it is currently 11:15. It's a little early for lunch, but we have the two options here is we can break for lunch and come back at noon, or we can kind of plow forward. We have around 18 members that are signed up. Oh, never mind. We are not breaking for lunch. Lunch is not here yet. So, folks, what we're going to do is we are going to transition to the action agenda. We're going to start with public comment. We have a number of folks here. And so I didn't do anything more formal than that. So we hereby adjourn the workshop meeting. I hereby bring the action meeting of the Commonwealth Transportation Board to order. And the first agenda item on there is public comment. Folks, as you come up to speak, please forgive me if I mispronounce your name. And it looks like we're also going to take a 5-minute break so that we can be respectful of folks giving public comment as board members go to the bathroom. So we stand suspended for 5 minutes. We're bringing the action meeting back into order. I'd ask everyone to take their seats. The first item on our agenda is public comment, as I noted. As I was saying before, we took a much-needed break, and I appreciate everyone's flexibility. That was a little bit more than 5 minutes. If I mispronounce your name, it is not on purpose. I assure you, I'm very bad at pronouncing names. So, again, it's an honest mistake, so please give me a little bit of grace. The other thing, folks, is we make comments, and I think, Carol, we have this keyed up. All folks, we'd ask you to stick to 3 minutes. Again, this is just to make sure everyone has an equal opportunity to provide comments to this board. And so with that, the first person who has signed up, and we're going to go in order of when you signed up, is Brandon Davis.
Mr. Secretary and members of the board, thank you for your service. It's a thankless job, and we appreciate it. I'm Brandon Davis. My day job is the director of the regional commission that serves the Northern Shenandoah Valley. I'm here today wearing the hat of the chair of the Shenandoah Rail Trail Partnership. Before that, I was the county planner and economic development and other things for Shenandoah County for 10 years before these last 10 years working for the regional commission. One of the first things they told me to do when they gave me economic development 20 years ago was get that rail line reactivated and pursue freight rail reactivation along that corridor. So have a long history of working and failing at that for a number of years, which has informed my work over the last 10, quite frankly. Times change, obviously, so I'm excited to learn about what new opportunities exist in the current marketplace. With that being said, this is a public project, in my opinion, and as such, it needs public oversight and an opportunity for these 9 towns and 3 counties, which I'm compelled to represent today, to have self-determination over this corridor that forms the backbone of their communities. And I think the path that you've set forward and your recommendation today reestablishes that ownership opportunity for these localities to become engaged and view this as a transparent process and reinstill the confidence in this body and in Richmond of the way that you all operate and do business. So I'm thankful for that opportunity, and I know the towns are as well. Rail banking is a legal mechanism for acquisition of a corridor that is different than selling and acquiring the corridor as an active railroad. A lot of research has gone into understanding what you can and can't do using rail banking over the last 10 years working on this project. I believe that the qualities of rail banking, such as preserving the corridor and still allowing for other uses aside from just a trail, such as the rail biking and the tourist trains and even limited freight use, may be an opportunity worth exploring and re-examining the value of that. It does provide some benefits beyond those things that are just obvious on the surface. So I've been asked to ask you all to take a look at that and see if this collaborative project that's going to be built it can be best served by rail banking or through a strict sale of the freight corridor and the risks associated with each. It is my opinion that this process provides the opportunity for the Commonwealth and these communities
and other interested parties to build a collaborative solution that results in a better project than any party has envisioned thus far.
Starting route to home.
Is that a hint?
So we'll give you another few seconds here, but then I'd ask that you wrap up.
Yeah. I'm encouraged that this is going to renew the Valley's faith in this work, and I urge you to move forward expediently on the public acquisition of this corridor. It's critical, and I recommit to you all to be a collaborative partner in this process to bring a project to fruition that benefits the Commonwealth and the Valley.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Kate Wofford.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary and members of the CTB. Will you permit me to use some of my time to convey the comment of Supervisor Sally Wolf Garrison, who had to cancel this morning?
These are your 3 minutes, ma'am.
Okay, my 3 minutes. So Sally Wolf Garrison is on the board of Rockingham County Board of Supervisors, and she's on the Central Shenandoah Planning District Commission, and she had planned to be here and had a conflict come up this morning. So what Sally was going to say is thank you for the opportunity to speak, and that she is representing both of those organizations from Western Virginia. And although she was coming specifically because of item 8 on the action agenda, let me be clear, I am not here to advocate just for a trail or just rail or rail with trail. I am here today to very sincerely say thank you. Thank you for being willing to revisit a hastily concocted decision that was made under less than ideal circumstances. Thank you for ensuring this remains an open process so the public can continue to share information and weigh in on what is important to them and to you. A project this significant warrants informed decisions. Your willingness to take that time is appreciated. It truly matters that you want to learn more about the Shenandoah Valley Rail Trail project, and Ms. Wolf Garrison invites you to take the time to explore what this project could actually become. The full scope of possibilities has yet to be appreciated. If it would help, please know that you have an open invitation to come see Western Virginia for yourself, walk the land, talk with the residents, come see and hear firsthand what your decisions mean to an entire region. So that's Sally Wolf Garrison, and that comment is in your packet. In my remaining minute and 15 seconds, I would like to follow up on some observations that the Secretary made at the beginning of this meeting about other nationally significant destination trails in Virginia that have strong community partners. And I would like to convey, if you don't already know, that the Shenandoah Rail Trail Partnership is a partnership of 9 towns and 3 counties and nonprofit partners that is absolutely committed to work with the Commonwealth to raise millions of dollars and tens of millions of dollars to get this done. And the partnership created a nonprofit arm called Friends of the Shenandoah Rail Trail. And in the near term, the Friends exists to raise private dollars from corporate donors, hospital systems, family foundations in the region. And then once the Shenandoah Rail Trail is in place, Friends exists to be a wonderful community partner like the one that you mentioned, Mr. Secretary. Thank you so much for taking the time to reconsider what was a deeply disappointing and flawed decision and process last month. I really applaud you for reconsidering that and keeping this process open until the right outcome is found. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Mary Beth Price.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. I am Mary Beth Price. I'm a retired Shenandoah County Administrator, and I have been a lifelong resident of Strasburg, Virginia. I currently assist my husband with his small business. I'm here to ask for your approval on the item related to the rescinding the action of the January 6th related to the Shenandoah Rail Trail. Discussion on the Shenandoah Rail Trail started back when I was Assistant County Administrator around 2009. In 2021, 9 towns and 3 counties adopted resolutions in support of this 49-mile trail. None of those localities have changed their support. This trail will connect those communities and economically will be a win for all. Folks come, enjoy the trail, spend their money, and they go home. I see both sides of this when I used to prepare the county budget and the expenses associated with that to local government, and the spending that my husband and I do now by visiting trails. The economics have been proven at trails such as High Bridge, Virginia Creeper, Greater Allegheny Passage, Erie Canal, Swamp Rabbit Trail, Thermal Belt, and more. These are all trails that my husband and I have enjoyed, and we're soon going to hit the Capitol Trail. They are clean and private property respected. Trails are enjoyed by all ages, whether walking, pushing, a stroller, or a walker, which I may do one day, jogging, bird watching, and cyclists. Go and visit a trail. You don't have to walk a mile or jog 5. See the folks that enjoy them. Park at a trailhead. See those folks. I heard concerns about the agricultural community. I had a grandfather in farming and a grandfather in railroad. Go to a trail with farming, Virginia Creeper and Greater Allegheny Passage. There are huge Amish farms selling homemade donuts and meals. I can attest. I ask for your approval to rescind the January 6 action of the CTB, continue with Phase 3 and the public process. We need this for our communities and the economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Austin Garber. Okay, moving on. Next, we have Don Hinman.
Hello, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Same with the distinguished members. Most of the members here have seen me speak at this microphone before, so I'm not going to say a whole lot more than thank you. Thank you for revisiting this tough decision, this tough conversation that you had this morning. As a retired emergency room and family medicine physician, I've had hundreds of tough conversations, telling people things that they don't want to hear. Like 30% of my community's children are obese. It's an easy number to remember, 30%, because the BMI is greater than 30, which is the medical definition of obesity. So this trail isn't going to solve that problem in our valley, but it will address it, and it'll address it in a way that is creative and economically beneficial to all sorts of folks up and down the Shenandoah Valley. So I also want to emphasize that our membership, the partnership, I'm the chair of the Friends Board that was introduced to you just a bit ago, but we haven't started creating large revenue from the Friends yet because we don't own the corridor. The state doesn't own it yet. Once we know which direction things are going, we stand ready to raise money. But in the meantime, our partnership of 17 members includes 9 mayors and 3 boards of supervisors. And you'll hear later from a board supervisor from Shenandoah County. It's no longer unanimous. But I'm convinced that 1, rail banking is misunderstood, and 2, most people here haven't been on a rail trail. So I encourage you, I would be glad to come back and give 3 minutes on rail banking. But in the meantime, I encourage you to find a trail and get out there and just watch and see. There are little toddlers there, there are old folks like me there, and everybody in between. And it is a way to improve the quality of life. Thank you again for returning to a transparent process. And that's all.
Thank you. Next, we have Brandy Hawkins Boise. Okay, we will put a little star, come back to her if she arrives in time. After that, we have Rowan Miller.
Good afternoon. Not yet. Good morning. Excuse me. Mr. Secretary, welcome. Members of the board, it's good to be before you again. My name is Rowan Miller, and I'm honored to speak to you today about the Shenandoah Rail Line. I represent Valley Railroad Company, which just so happens to be at the very center of this railroad in Woodstock, Virginia, and we are excited by this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity project to construct a trail within an active railroad right-of-way. This will be the only example of this type of project in Virginia. We are concerned about this move to rescind January's progress, but we're confident that the board will make the right decision today. And I'm also encouraged by the rail experience and knowledge of our newcomers. Mr. Secretary, thank you for all your work on the Transforming Rail in Virginia initiative. Valley Railroad Company was established by our owner, Derek Burgess, in April of 2010, and we specialize in the maintenance and construction of railroad track and related parts all across Virginia. We stand ready to use our maintained fleet of track equipment to fix this railroad for the Commonwealth and for the Shenandoah Valley. This project would add 30 local jobs to our already 11 jobs we've created in our 15-year history. Now, we joined the Shenandoah Rail Corridor Coalition in 2024 and have applied our combined 80 years of expertise to evaluating the reports from both VDOT and our coalition. Now, let me be very clear. In no scenario will it cost $305 million to fix 49 miles of track. Rather, our company stands by the findings in our coalition's 2023 track report, which states that the track, which has been last used in 2020, can be fixed for approximately $18 million or less over the 5-year period. It also claims that 2/3 of the rails could host a train today. Sadly, that 2/3 is shrinking every day we wait to make a move on this. As industry professionals, we confirm the intrinsic value of this line, and you don't just erroneously rip out control-cooled welded rail like you see on this corridor. Folks, I believe that the trail-only option is now futile at this point due to the attention that this viable rail line has received from the rail industry across the nation. If this project takes the abandonment route, at least several of our shippers and several short lines will contest this with the STB. That body is predisposed to maintaining rail service, and a successful bidder that's not on the pre-selected operator list will be allowed to steal the railroad from the Commonwealth for scrap value and will not be willing to carry the private insurance required to have a trail in the right-of-way. A vote to rescind this could jeopardize the Commonwealth's control over this resource. In conclusion, the Valley Railroad Company looks forward to partnering with our friends at the Trail Exploratory Partnership to creatively build this trail into this space. Rail with trail satisfies exactly what all 9 towns and 3 counties have asked for a decade, and reintroduces rail service in a highway congested market. A vote to rescind last month's decision is a step backwards.
So you wrap up?
Yes, sir. And threatens the rail and trail. But a vote for rail with trail is a vote for progress, compromise, and collaboration for a real transportation solution for everybody. Thank you, and we'll be seeing you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Frank Nolan.
Mr. Secretary, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about agriculture and tourism, and as rail with trail augments that. My claim in agriculture is that I'm the father of the Virginia Right to Farm Act that we passed years ago and is still on the books and helping with the farmers. My claim to fame in trails is that I started out hiking the Appalachian Trail, but I ended up on horseback riding most all the trails in the Virginia state parks. And I would like to have an opportunity for my grandchildren to ride this trail. Now I want to get right to the business at hand and how rail with trail will help agriculture and tourism. This is not my first rodeo when it comes to negotiating with railroads. It started back in the late 80s when John Snow, CEO of CSX, told the Valley that they would like to stop operating on the mountain line, L-I-N-E, not L-I-O-N, from Clifton Forge to Gordonsville. Well, we got with our agriculture people and saw what that would do to us. And so some others and I formed a nonprofit to take it on. We raised enough money to get a study that said that a short line on that line would be profitable if the service was provided. And so we put our money together and negotiated. The week before we were to close, he called me and said, well, considering Amtrak and so forth, we're going to withdraw and keep running ourselves. So he kept on running until you all bought it. You know, now it's owned by the Commonwealth of Virginia, and Buckingham Branch is running it. Now, the next time it came up, negotiations were needed when Norfolk Southern said they no longer wanted to run on the old Crooked and Weedy line from Harrisonburg south to Stanton. And so we never disbanded their group. We kept them together, so we took that on. And it was one heck of a negotiations. It was tough, but we ended up negotiating, and we purchased it, and we did it without any outside money, of taxpayer money, and acquired it.
Mr. Nolan, I would ask that you wrap up your comments.
Oh, I'm only half through. Can I change my name?
I'm afraid not, sir. I appreciate you trying, though.
Pardon?
Please wrap up your comments, sir.
Sit down.
You can say one or two more things if you'd like, and then sit
okay.
down, but very brief.
Well, that's been very successful. We haul 2,000 carloads a year. Takes 8,000 trucks off the road. A lot of that is the road salt for VDOT, for all the roads in the west. The rest of it's feed for agriculture, and we also haul all the propane to heat our homes and our poultry houses. Now, I want to get right on to the main part.
Very briefly, sir.
I'm sorry, I have trouble hearing.
Very briefly, sir, you're well over your time. Please conclude your comments. You're over time.
Well, I just want to talk about the fact that we need to act now. That my daddy always told me, you had to strike when the iron was hot, and the iron's red hot, and we don't know what's going to happen in Washington with the merger, whether it'll be approved or not. And we could lose this whole thing and not even get a trail if something were to happen up there. You know how Mr. Buffett is. He might decide he don't want to sell this part of rail or this part of real estate, and then we wouldn't have a trail or anything. We need to move on and get
Mr.
it
Nolan,
done.
thank you, sir. I have to ask you to stop now, just to be respectful of the other commenters. Next, we have, and I apologize in advance if I mispronounce your last name, Samuel Haddock. I'm pretty sure. Thank you. I was like, there's a letter in there. I can't figure out what it is, so I'm sure I said it wrong. But thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. But Mr. Secretary, appreciate your time, and to the board, thank you for hearing me. So my name is Samuel Hadachek. I'm a staff assistant at the Virginia Cattlemen's Association, represent all of Virginia's cattle producers, and we essentially work to help promote and protect the interest of cattle producers in the Commonwealth. We're here to voice our support of the recent vote of the Commonwealth Transportation Board to transfer the funds to the VPRA to advance the Rails with Trails project. We believe that rescinding this resolution opens the possibility of a trail only, which we believe is what would be a vital loss of infrastructure. Removing the opportunity to have rails would be incredibly short-sighted, given the potential this rail has to offer to cattle producers and the ag industry in general. Agriculture is the largest industry in the valley. Beef cattle is the Commonwealth's second largest agricultural enterprise in cash receipts, and supportive cattle is the state's largest use of private land and agricultural production. State's two largest cattle-producing counties, that's Augusta and Rockingham, are located in the heart of this valley, with Rockingham containing parts of this rail, both of which I believe can benefit from the rail if it is put back into use. The viability of our industry depends on having diverse infrastructure and opportunities. The industry depends on having access to commodities that are not always available or grown in Virginia, and we depend on having the availability to ship our products to other markets in interstate commerce at a competitive rate. It is our understanding that the rail once helped provide those opportunities, and we believe that it has the potential to develop back into a vital transportation source. For example, feeding cattle, whether backgrounding or otherwise, is a growing practice in the valley, and the demand for bulk feed is increasing. And with trucks being currently the only way to transport feed into the valley, we believe that the reintroduction of competitive rail freight rates competing with other options stands to stimulate the industry, and removing the rails permanently takes away that opportunity from the valley's farmers. The association supports efforts to maintain and build infrastructure to help sustain and grow our industry. And maintaining is key. It seems counterintuitive to tear up infrastructure of any kind, especially the kind that can benefit the valley's top industry, and especially if a trail is possible alongside it. Cattle producers are constantly looking for competitive options to acquire the commodities needed to keep their businesses running and thriving. And we believe that removing the rail may put them at a disadvantage in the future as the industry grows. Therefore, again, we urge the board to continue with transferring the funds to the VPRA and to keep the infrastructure vital to the valley's economy. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jim Pfeiffer.
Morning, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. Thanks for hearing me. My name is Jim Pfeiffer. I am here representing the Shortline Railroad community. SMS Rail Service, I'm the Chief Operating Officer. We are a family-owned business that has been running trains for 30 years. 8 operations, 3 states, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York. We've been involved in this project for a little over a year. We have a sincere interest in operating this railroad, bringing it back to life. I believe I may be the first that anybody's heard of from the Shortline community. It's definitely a viable project. I had a whole speech prepared this morning. It doesn't seem like this is the forum for it. It was more about preserving the tracks. Right now, we just need to get the corridor, get it saved. The board's desire to be transparent, sound operationally, it's respectable. But we're here, we're ready, and it's an exciting project. Tourism, rail bikes, steam locomotives, and old passenger cars, freight trains, that 50 miles can all be brought back to life. We've done it. We did it in Salem, New Jersey, a 20-mile piece of railroad, much the same, impassable in 2021. We now have a tourist operation on it. We have freight trains running on it. We're building the economy on both sides. So I'll yield my minute and 30 seconds to the next person. Short lines are here. We're strong. We're part of the community. We're very results-oriented. We're very customer-focused, unlike the Class 1s, and that's what we have to offer. It would be a mistake to let this opportunity go. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And before the next person comes up, the time does not roll over. It just resets at 3 minutes. I appreciate the thought, but just wanted to clear that up. Next, we have Joe Perry.
Good afternoon, Secretary and Board. It's an honor to speak before you today. I'm Joe Petty. I'm with the town of Front Royal. And I just want to state that Town Council has been supportive of this since 2021. We were a little late to the party when we were added after Shenandoah County and others. And we would be the northern terminus of the Shenandoah Rail Trail. We see this 49-mile potential trail providing jobs, providing access that is safe for our residents, for our visitors, to both retail and different amenities throughout our community. And we also just see this as another outdoor asset. We are a trail town. We're home of the Appalachian Trail that comes through us, the northern terminus of the Shenandoah National Park, We are the canoe capital of Virginia, and so we have the Shenandoah River, which people paddle on. And so this would just be another amazing outdoor asset for Front Royal, for the Shenandoah Valley, and the Commonwealth as a whole. We encourage further public participation. I think today we've heard a lot about transparency and collaboration, and we just want to see that through, similar as we do at the town of Front Royal. We encourage that, and we look forward to participating in that process. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have John Henry.
Hi, I'm John Henry. I own John Henry General Store in downtown Newmarket, Virginia. My family's lived in Mount Jackson for 5 generations now, right across the railroad, and growing up, I actually never remember the train running, so I was kind of surprised to hear that last ran in 2020, because the trees that grow in the middle are quite big and memorable. And the only time I really remember going on the trail was walking from Mount Jackson up to Quicksburg to my grandma's house and getting harassed by the cops for trespassing. But right now in Newmarket, I run John Henry General Store. We serve about 65,000 customers a year in a small town of 2,000. I'm also on the Shenandoah County Retail Task Force, and I'm also the newly elected council member for the town of Newmarket. And in our 2,000 square foot store that we have about 4 staff that work 363 days a year, we have a pretty customer-centric relationship with lots of folks. I don't always remember their names, but I do remember what type of milk they drink, which is typically whole milk. If you're in VDAX, that's really important when I speak there. But it seems pretty exciting that this project is moving ahead, because when I was young, my dad said they would do something with the rail line after they finished adding a 3rd lane to 81, and I was quite surprised the idea that my dad might have to eat crow on this situation. Kind of exciting. And I understand that governments can work pretty slowly and at different speeds. The town of Newmarket, now that I've been on council, after 15 years, we are hoping to vote tomorrow to build a sidewalk for 1.5 blocks. The original price quote went from $24,000 15 years ago to, I think, tomorrow our budget line is $500,000. We also just finished voting and started construction on a water tower that's been a 20-year project to build 1 water tower to keep water in the town of Newmarket flowing. So I'm really excited when I get to hear about governments actually moving fast and exciting. I think COVID taught us, particularly in the world of agriculture, particularly in food access, that governments can move quickly when they want to help our people. Particularly in Shenandoah County, I get concerned when 50% of our students are on free and reduced lunch. We have a high obesity epidemic, of course, across this nation. Our store has been rated as, the #1 health food store in the Shenandoah Valley. We accept as much SNAP and Fresh Match programs as Market 25 here in downtown Richmond. So we see a lot of the working class poor, and I would say a lot of folks that I know in our community are just concerned about actually seeing some type of effect sooner rather than later, and hoping that change can happen quicker in our community, because we hear a lot of promises, but we don't see a lot of action. So I look forward to an expedited process for our rail program here in Shenandoah County.
Thank you, sir. And next we have, and I apologize, I'm having trouble reading the last name, Robert Faison.
Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary and members of the board. Thank you for your time today. My name is Robert Franzen, and our company is Railroad Investment Corporate Holdings. We are one of several organizations interested in partnering with the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation to develop the Shenandoah Rail Corridor and Rail Trail. I'd like to briefly share why we believe this opportunity matters, and respectfully ask the board not to rescind their earlier vote, allowing this process to continue without delay. Why delay and rescind the January 6th vote when VPRA has agreed to accept the $35 million and transfer the money to the Battlefield Foundation? And when the Battlefield Foundation has agreed to build the trail, and when the Battlefield Foundation will pick a rail operator to manage and operate the railroad prior to the corridor, and work with the Battlefield Foundation to build a trail beside the current railroad bed. First, a bit of background. Our company owns and operates the Potomac Eagle Scenic Railroad based in Romney, West Virginia. Our excursion trains run through March through December and showcase the natural beauty of the Potomac River Valley. We employ almost 80 full-time, part-time, and seasonal team members, most of them local residents. We are not a large corporate railroad, but a small business focused on promoting economic development and tourism through scenic rail excursions. Simply put, the Shenandoah Rail Corridor represents an opportunity to create jobs, support local business, and bring new visitors to communities along the line. And it is the opportunity to provide Rockingham, Shenandoah, and Warren counties with a unique attraction that residents and visitors can enjoy together. Which brings me to the topic of the bike trail. Some are trying to frame this as a fight between rail and trail. I want to be extremely clear. We support the Battlefields Foundation mission for rail with trail. Both can absolutely coexist and strengthen each other, as we like to do in several other places in the United States. While there is much work to be done, we believe trains and rail bikes could begin operations within 6 to 12 months after operating agreements are in place. The plan would be to open the north and south ends of the railroad, with the middle section opening soon thereafter. The entire line from Front Royal to Broadway could be open in 3 to 5 years. We have the equipment ready to send to Virginia immediately. In conclusion, I urge the board not to rescind the vote and to continue forward on the path we have started. I ask the board to follow through in their support with the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority and the Shenandoah Battlefields Foundation in delivering this exciting attraction, economic development engine to the Shenandoah Valley, including, as promised, the Battlefields Foundation plan to build the trail beside the tracks. They're going to pay for it. They're going to build it. They're going to raise the funds. Thank you for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions and speak with anybody after about this.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Meredith Richards.
Hello, I'm Meredith Richards. I'm president of the Virginia Rail Policy Institute, which is a nonprofit focused on freight and passenger rail policy in the Commonwealth. I'm also chair of the National Association of Railroad Passengers, which for almost 60 years now, has successfully fought to bring more trains to more places for more people. I am also the author of a document you may have received by now entitled Multi-Use Trails and the Preservation of Virginia Rail Lines. And I became involved in passenger rail when I led a group on the US 29 corridor to bring new passenger rail to the corridor. And that successfully led to our first state-supported train, the Lynchburg Northeast Regional, which has been a great success and has led the way for the great growth in rail passenger service that we've seen in Virginia over the last several years. And this success has reflected long-term planning, strategic investment, and a consistent commitment to preserving, enhancing, and extending rail infrastructure. And that consistency has been one of the Commonwealth's strengths and has positioned Virginia as a national leader in rail policy. The Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation has demonstrated sustained effort, planning, and capacity to manage this corridor. And rail with trail projects have been successfully implemented in many states, and this corridor is particularly well suited for that approach. I do want to point out that we should realize that the preservation of this rail corridor for future use ultimately depends on the rail with trail option. This is because while rail banking preserves a corridor legally, experience across the country shows that once a corridor becomes trail only, reactivation for rail use is extraordinarily unlikely. In the document I mentioned, I cite research at DePaul University in Chicago that identified 90 reactivation projects in mostly urban areas across the country, not a single one of which involved a reactivation from a rail converted to trail. At the national level, we consistently see the long-term consequences of incremental corridor loss. Even where there's strong public interest and federal funding available, projects often stall because key rail segments were previously abandoned or converted without preserving rail use.
Ma'am, I would ask you to conclude your remarks.
All right, Virginia has avoided many of these outcomes because it has taken the longer view. For these reasons, I respectfully urge you to uphold your January approval and allow the Rail with Trail project in the Shenandoah Valley to move forward without further delay. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Hobie Bonham. And I apologize, Hobie, I'm pretty sure I mispronounced your last name there.
No worries. Hobie Bowen, I'm president of Virginia Poultry Federation, a role I took on in January of 1998. So I've seen a lot of changes in the industry, seen investment in the industry, growth in the industry. Poultry is Virginia's largest agricultural sector. The Shenandoah Valley is the heart of the poultry industry. Rockingham County ranks number 2 nationally in the value of poultry and eggs raised in the country. So very, very important. We have a lot of infrastructure, feed mills, hatcheries, processing plants, hundreds of family farmers that rely on our industry. Feed is a big part of the cost of raising poultry. It's about 70%. Given the size of our industry in the Shenandoah Valley, we provide huge markets for local producers of grain as well as regional. But local and regional does not sustain our industry. We're sustained in significant part by rail. We have to import feed ingredients from the Midwest. And so rail is essential to our industry, and competitive rail service is very, very important. I was here last month, and we supported the proposal to move forward with the plan that was presented. I'm here again to reiterate that. I hope you'll give that consideration. You all we do a great job in Virginia, and you all are a big part of that as far as our infrastructure. Transportation is so important to the poultry industry, whether it's I-81. We're seeing good improvements on I-81. That's critical to us. But rail infrastructure is equally important, and we just think it would be a big mistake not to preserve that infrastructure in the Northern Valley and look at opportunities to bring that back. So I appreciate the chance to be with you again today and hope you'll give that strong consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jack Owens.
Good afternoon. I'll be reading remarks on behalf of Craig George, who is a licensed landscape architect and partner at Valley Engineering in Harrisonburg, Virginia. In business since 1997, Valley Engineering has provided surveying, landscape architecture, and planning, engineering, and construction administration services for hundreds of projects in the region, with a core area along the I-81 corridor in the Shenandoah Valley. Our clients range from local farmers to state agencies with numerous project types in both the private and public sector. Our firm has been working closely with the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields Foundation to analyze the existing rail corridor and provide preliminary design concepts for the Shenandoah Rail Corridor. Our task was to study the feasibility of the rail with trail concept and to provide our professional opinion as to its viability within the existing Norfolk Southern Railroad right-of-way. With most of our design team living along the proposed rail with trail corridor, we bring direct firsthand insight into both the opportunities and the factors shaping this project. Our study started with reviewing and visiting successful rail with trail projects in the Mid-Atlantic region, particularly the Great Allegheny Passage in Cumberland, Maryland, and the York County Heritage Rail Trail Park in York, PA. Both rail with trail projects are just a few hours away from the Shenandoah Valley and provide examples of high-use trails next to low-volume, low-speed trains. Our takeaways from these visits is that in both examples, the trails are located directly adjacent to active tracks without barriers, yet they function as safe, comfortable facilities, particularly when compared with walking or biking along high-speed, narrow rural roads. Trail user comfort and perceived safety are influenced primarily by train frequencies, speed, and overall corridor context. Eventually, these factors, alongside the specific conditions of each corridor segment, supports practical, context-sensitive design decisions. Because rail with trail projects rely on established best practices rather than a singular perspective standard, there is flexibility to refine the trail footprint in ways that can also help manage construction cost. Although parallel trails are commonly viewed as more costly than centerline alignments, real-world design conditions and corridor efficiencies can substantially reduce the cost gap between what is suggested in the VDOT report. It is our opinion that by controlling the frequency and speed of adjacent trains, design parameters can be adjusted to make parallel trail construction both safe and financially viable. This, coupled with the Battlefields Foundation's ability to advance the project through private construction, presents a strong opportunity to meaningfully reduce the cost projections outlined in the VDOT assessment. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Kevin Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. It's an honor to be in front of you today, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention how proud we are of our son from the Valley, Deputy Secretary Hutchinson, and we are very, very pleased that he's been appointed and very proud that he's from the Valley. I want to thank you all for giving us a little bit of time to talk today. We've covered a lot over the last couple of months, and we have covered even more over the last 25 years. We've ramped up the engagement on this corridor over the last 5 years or so. So there's been a lot said already, and we're always available for questions or interaction with the CTB or the administration. I just wanted to speak directly today to a couple of things that have come up over and over. And one of them is the concern over process and transparency. I want to make sure that the entire CTB and the administration knows that we are fully committed to whatever process the CTB and the administration decides to move forward with. This is a generational project for the Shenandoah Valley. This is the Commonwealth's money, which means it's the people's money. And these are heavy and weighty concerns that have been presented by my friends and neighbors from back home. The other thing that I want to point out is something that I think is extremely positive and should make your jobs easier in the long run. Every single person that you've heard from the Shenandoah Valley today is in favor of moving forward with your trail project. All of us are here excited about the trail and very engaged in making this the very best corridor and resource for the Commonwealth. With that said, I would like to mention that the most important part of the decision that was made by this board when it passed its resolution on January 6th was the decision to specify a rail with trail approach for the corridor. This decision, by all accounts, was not made lightly and was made only after years of very public debate and what has been described as the most extensive amount of public input on any particular issue in anyone's recent memory that's been before the CTB. In the end, what you chose on January 6th was a well-reasoned compromise and a path forward that not only addressed the concerns of all parties, but also set in motion the ability of the corridor to generate some of its own revenue for long-term maintenance, management, and safety. Your resolution provided clarity, long-awaited leadership and direction, and supported not just one interest group or industry, but multiple industries, mainly tourism and agriculture. What we would ask is that this budget amendment, that this resolution not be passed, and that the language of the budget amendment somehow be added to a different amendment or a revisit of the last amendment, but that you embrace the most important part of what you did in the last meeting. Take the Battlefields Foundation out of it.
Sir, I would ask you to conclude your remarks.
Yes, sir. Extend the timeline for public input, but do not undo the direction you gave when you chose rail with trail. Thank you.
Mark Dotson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary, members of CTB. It's great to be here again. My name is Mark Dotson. I currently serve as a supervisor in Shenandoah County. I've also in the past been a planning commissioner, and I'm a third-generation cattle farmer as well. What a long day, and what a deep dive on a really passionate issue for so many people. I believe that your decision in January 6th was the correct one, and I ask you to not rescind that motion. But I also want to underscore what I believe are really kind of the key themes that really bear on whatever you do going forward. Shenandoah County is the majority stakeholder. The 70% of this corridor is in our county. Of course, we have wonderful friends and neighbors and partners who have interests as well, but this is really important. We have to make sure that we remain focused on what this means to this county. Our other counties, for example, have thriving rail, and we're happy for them, as well as the story. When you piece together narratives where there's individual pieces, and it sounds like everyone's in unison, and that's one agreed upon story, that's really not accurate. And I'll give you an example. When it comes to economic impact, many of you have been elected officials, I'm sure. It matters what you're talking about. So consumption-based taxes in the 6 towns in Shenandoah County doesn't help me with a $240 million capital improvement shortfall, which is primarily schools. Those are shared services. We need to revitalize our number one industry, which is ag, and reinforce number 2, which is tourism. Rail's critical to that. It's not about necessarily selling ag products as much as it is about those bulk commodities and making sure that we have infrastructure that sustains that. So now let's make sure that we remain focused on the story, which is this is a generational decision for this county. This is our rail corridor. It happens to parallel a very congested interstate corridor as well that you're doing tremendous work on. But let's not remove infrastructure, because this is an opportunity for us to revitalize. We have many, many vacant facilities that are adjacent to this corridor. I just toured one that was 63,000 square feet. It has its own service line and rail tunnel. It's been shown many, many times with no one taking that up at this point. As I mentioned last time, of course, our comprehensive plan is totally in line with your vision. We want a regional trail, but we also want desperately to revitalize our industry. And I would just also offer 2 words of caution. So as you move forward with this corridor, I think rail banking is an extreme red herring argument. Rail will not be replaced if it's torn out, as well as the mention on the Surface Transportation Board and the OFA. We could risk losing local control of this corridor to industry, and all of these options would be off the table. Mr. Secretary, I want to speak frankly because that's what we are here to do. I would also urge strong caution about some of the very, very challenging biases and the challenges built into the VDOT methodology for their study, and I shared all those with VDOT and your team. And for example, there is no mention of agriculture at all in the current VDOT study. So if you go that route, and VDOT is both holding meetings, but more importantly, doing analysis on those takeaways, there are fundamental flaws that must be addressed, because I think we've heard how important those parts are to this discussion. So, and then finally, I'll just say that Virginia has a pattern or history of achieving bold projects. I believe we're very fortunate to have a very qualified partner that's been congressionally designated, and so I urge you to vote no for the rescission. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. That is the final individual I had signed up to give public comment. That doesn't mean if you haven't signed up, you don't have the opportunity now. So I just wanted to see if there were any other folks that were interested in giving public comment. Yes, sir. Please state your name as we don't have it.
My name is Evan Knappenberger. I live in Harrisonburg. I am a historian, and as I'm sitting here listening, it just occurs to me. In 1847, Henry Ruffner gave a speech and published it as a pamphlet about the creation of a state of West Virginia. This was, 15, 20 years before West Virginia became a state. One of the things that he cites in his rationale is the lack of road infrastructure in Western Virginia compared to the amount of taxes they were paying. And as we come to learn, the Western Virginians didn't much appreciate paying a higher tax burden for less services. They were ready for some infrastructure. So I think if there's any lesson in the history here, we could say that you only have a limited window of time in which to act before politics overtakes government. So that's all I had to say.
Thank you very much. The chair has had to step out for some, I guess, legislative conversation, but he asked that we continue to move along with the agenda. And the next item pertains to the Cleveland Barrens Natural Area in the in the Bristol district. But before we do that, we need to consider the minutes of the January 6th meeting. Are there any corrections, additions, or questions regarding those minutes? Thank you. We have a motion for approval. Is there a second? And a second. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. We will now move on to the Bristol District item, and Terry Short will present this.
Sir, thank you so much. This is from our last month's meeting where I presented to you a recreational access application for the Cleveland Barrens Natural Area Preserve. Resolution and accompanying presentation is included in your packet if there are any questions, but recommend for approval.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
Have a motion and a second. Any questions, comments? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Thank you very much, and the secretary has returned.
Thank
Now
you, Vice
on
Chair
item
Smoot.
3.
Item 2 or 3?
Item 2.
Thank you. I was about to say, Carol's pointing at 2 and you're telling me 3. All right, next up, Mr. Hofrichter. How are you, sir?
Doing well. Good morning. Is it still morning? No.
Good afternoon now.
Secretary, members of the board. First item that I bring to you is an action on an abandonment for a portion of a previously discontinued section of Route 57 in Henry County in Salem District. No one uses the segment. The adjoining property owners have separate driveway that connects to 57. And we recommend approval of this abandonment.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, Mr. Hoffer. Next.
All right. Second item is a discontinuance request, secondary system state highways portion of Route 1023 in Giles County. It's actually in Rich Creek. The road is essentially not there. It's one single property owner. He parks his vehicles all over the place. But there is a house at the end of it, so since it's on a separate lot, even though it's the same owner, we're recommending discontinuance instead of abandonment, and therefore the right of the public to travel there still exists.
we have a motion?
So move.
A second?
Approval.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Thank you, Mr. Officer. You're next.
Right, and last for me, bring to you action on moving forward with the regulations for outdoor advertising. We made a presentation on this last month. The only set of comments that we had received was from Scenic America, and we'll recommend or request that we be able to move forward to post the comments.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions or discussion? All right, do we have a motion? Thank you. Do you have a second? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, Mr. Hofrichter. Ms.
you.
Pryor?
Good afternoon. I have 2 items for your review today. The first, you should have in your packet the monthly transfers. That includes transfers for your approval as well as those for your information, and I recommend your approval.
Any discussion? All right, do we have a second? Second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you, Ms. Pryor. Do your next one?
Second item is a recommendation for the amendment of 2 projects to the 6-year improvement program. One is to provide VDOT oversight in the Northern Virginia District funded with local funds, and the second is a safety project in Culpeper District, Albemarle County, and I recommend your approval.
Thank you. Any discussion? Do we have a motion? All right, do we have a second? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Ms. Pryor. Mr. Fye?
Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary and members of the CTB. Director Zimmerman gave you a brief overview of the request for a resolution to authorize an extended action or extended timeline for review of the merit program. Basically, staff are looking into what those changes could potentially be. We've received positive feedback from TISDAC to extend the time, and staff recommends moving forward.
All right, any discussion? Do we have a motion?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Mr. Hutchinson?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, item number 8 is for the reconsideration of this board's decision on the Shenandoah Valley Rail Trail for the transfer of funding from VDOT to VPRA for advancement of the project. As briefed to you all earlier today, it is recommended that the board rescind its January 6, 2026 decision, which will retain the project and its funding in VDOT's 6-year improvement program, and I recommend your approval.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I move for a partial rescission of the January 6th, 2026 resolution, now to take out sections 1 and 3. Section 1 is conduct public hearings on the intended use of the funds received from CTB for this project, and let VDOT continue what it planned to do, which was discussed earlier today. That work should be finished. Secondly, to take out item 3, which is give due consideration to any additional proposal. I think it's important that good management of the project be secured at the earliest date to accommodate some of the opportunities that were discussed in public comment. So I move for partial rescission of the January 6, 2026 resolution, sections 1 and 3.
I'd like to offer a substitute motion, and that is.
Mr. Folks, could you approve?
I move to approve the resolution to rescind the January action of this board.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand, as I suspect Carol will need to count votes. Okay, all those opposed? All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hutchinson.
Could the record reflect that I abstained?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. My apologies. All right, moving on to the final agenda item here is bids. So, Mr. Coker?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. I have 18 projects for your consideration today in excess of $5 million. First up is Order 158 in the Bristol District. This is UPC 127272. This is a 2026 plant mix project on the interstate systems in Washington, Smith, and Wythe counties. We received one bid from WL Construction and Paving for $8.2 million. This is within range, and I recommend award.
Any discussion? Do we have a motion?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Order 159 in the Bristol District. This is UPC 127273. This is a 2026 plant mix project on the interstate systems in Bland and Wythe counties. We received a single bid from WL Construction and Paving for $8 million. This is within range, and I recommend award.
Thank you. Any discussion? Do we have a motion? A second? Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Order 280 in the Salem District. This is UPC 127366. This is a 2026 plant mix project on the interstate systems in Botetourt, Carroll, and Pulaski counties. We received one bid from Adams Construction Company for $12.4 million. This is within range, and I recommend award.
Any discussion? A motion?
Move approval.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Order 559 in the Hampton Roads District. This is UPC 127811. This is a 2026 plant mix project on the interstate systems in Suffolk County and the city of Norfolk. We received three bids. The low bidder was Allen Myers for $5.5 million. This is within range, and I recommend award.
Any discussion? Do we have a motion? Thanks, sir. Do we have a second? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Order 280 in the Salem District. This is, oops, sorry, I went the wrong way. Move forward, not backwards, right? Order 281 in the Salem District. This is UPC 127367. This is a 2026 plant mix project on the primary systems in Carroll and Giles counties. We received one bid from Adams Construction Company for $5.5 million. This is within range, and I recommend award.
Any discussion? Do we have a motion?
Move approval.
Thank you. Do we have a second? It's done up. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you.
Order 340 in the Lynchburg District. We have multiple UPCs in this project. This is a SGR 2026 plant mix project on the primary and secondary systems in Appomattox and Campbell counties in the city of Lynchburg. We received two bids. The low bidder was Superior Paving Corporation for $6.9 million. This is within range, and I recommend award.
Any discussion? Do we have a motion?
Move approval.
Second? Second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you.
Order 489 in the Richmond District. We have two UPCs in this project. This is a 2026 plant mix project in the primary and secondary systems in Mecklenburg County. We received one bid from Adams Construction Company, just under $7 million. This is within range, and I recommend award.
Any discussion? Do we have a second? Thank you. All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you.
Order 565 in the Hampton Roads District. This is UPC 128165. This is a 2026 concrete repair project on the primary system in James City County. We received two bids. The low bidder was Curtis Contracting Incorporated for $8.4 million. This is within range, and I recommend award.
Have a second? Second. Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Order 886 in the Stanton District. This is UPC 127548. This is a 2026 plant mix project on the primary system in Rockingham County. We received one bid from Adams Construction Company for $7.1 million. This is within range, and I recommend award.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
Thank you. Do we have a second? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? And Mr. Cook, before you go forward, So folks, we have about 8 more of these. My understanding is they are all in range. We can continue to take them one at a time, or I could have him read through all of them. And if anyone has a concern, we could pull that one out, and then maybe we could advance the remaining items as a block. And I'm looking around to see if there's comfort with the board on that. Spectacular. So please run through. If you hear concern, or board members who are concerned, please flag that concern. We'll remove that one from the remaining portion of the agenda, and then we'll consider all of these in a single block.
Sounds good. Order 910 in the Northern Virginia District. This is UPC 128195. This is a 2026 plant mix project on the primary system in Loudoun County. We received 4 bids. The low bidder was Allen Myers for $5.6 million. This is within range. Order 911 in the Northern Virginia District. This is UPC 128196. This is a 2026 plant mix project in the primary system in Prince William County. We received 5 bids. The low bidder was Chemung Contracting Corporation for $6 million. This is within range. Order 484 in the Richmond District. This is UPC 127962. This is a 2026 plant mix project on the interstate system in Dinwiddie County. We received 2 bids. The low bid was Allen Myers for $9.1 million. This is within range. Order 161 in the Bristol District. This is UPC 127275. This is a 2026 plant mix project on the primary system in Dickinson and Wise counties. We received 2 bids. The low bidder was WL Construction and Paving for $5.8 million. This is within range. Order 163 in the Bristol District. This is UPC 127279. This is a 2026 plant mix project on the primary system in Smith and Washington counties. We received 2 bids. The low bidder was WL Construction and Paving for $5.8 million. This is within range. Order 285 in the Salem District. This is UPC 127371. This is a 2026 plant mix project on the primary system in Craig and Roanoke counties. We received 2 bids. The low bidder was Adams Construction Company for $5.3 million. This is within range. Order 686 in the Fredericksburg District. This project had multiple UPCs. This is a 2026 plant mix project on the primary system in Northumberland and Lancaster counties. We received 2 bids. The low bidder was Lehigh Construction for $5.8 million. This is within range. Order N75 in the Lynchburg District. This is UPC 126013. This is a Route 29 shoulder improvements project in Nelson County. We received 4 bids. The low bidder was S.L. Williamson Company for $7.7 million. This is within range. And our final project is Order 341 in the Lynchburg District. This is UPC 127088. This is a State of Good Repair 2026 plant mix project on the primary and secondary systems in Pennsylvania County and the city of Danville. We received 2 bids. The low bidder was Superior Paving Corporation for $5.4 million. And this is within range. And I move to award all projects as discussed.
Thank you, sir. Is there any discussion or motion?
Move approval.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, thank you very much. Well, folks, I really appreciate you all coming today. Members of the public, we really do appreciate you coming to, express your sentiments and feedbacks on the actions before the board. That concludes today's action meeting. I do have one item I just want to note before we adjourn fully or everyone gets up because the meeting is adjourned. One of the other items, in addition to kind of the calendar that I talked about of items, is I want to work on a consent agenda for items for the board, and so we'll be reaching out to you guys and talking about concepts. But, for example, economic access funds, rail industrial access funds, potentially bids when they're within range, but there's a variety of things that we want to consider moving to a kind of consent agenda, so we're not spending 10 or 20 minutes talking about something like that, which will then give all of you more time to ask questions about smart scale, state of good repair, or other things. And the real kind of intent here, if you're looking for a theme, is let's talk about where we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars, not where we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, so that you can have the time to provide input on those types of programs, and that we're not losing that opportunity by talking about some of those smaller projects, which are still extremely important and very impactful for their communities. But I think they can also move to the consent agenda as the programs are pretty straightforward. So again, thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you.